Transportation Commission meeting for March 9, 2022, and it is our annual retreat is the agenda item. We're all going to get used to chambers here again tonight, so pluses and minuses on turning on our lights and our buttons and things like that, so bear with us. It's kind of odd that our first time back in a retreat, which is blue jeans and casual, is in the formality of chambers, but that's okay. We're delighted to be back and see some people in person that we have only seen once or twice in the last couple of years. So glad to go on with this. So I think we have some procedures that have to be followed in terms of the hybrid. Who's going to do that? Okay. Assistant Director Tanner is on screen, as is Commissioner Rupavar. The other 6 commissioners are here and present.
Great, thank you. I don't know, Ms. Klicheva, if there is a different screen that has the PTC email on it than the one that you were sharing just now.
Can you give us a little bit more volume?
Let me see. Can you hear me now? Mm-hmm. Okay, I think Medina, you were sharing a screen that had some instructions, but it just had the ARB email address on it, but I didn't know if there was a different screen you wanted to share while I read out the instructions, or if you were not going to share one.
Yeah, Rachel, I made a correction right now.
Okay. So if you want to pull that up, then I will just read out some information. We don't have any attendees that I see online, and I understand we don't have any attendees in the chamber, but we'll read this out because this will be kind of our practice as we have hybrid meetings, and making sure the public who may be participating online can continue to participate. So always, written communications can be sent to planning.commission@cityofpaloalto.org via email, and those can be received. They will be distributed to the members of the Planning Commission. Tonight, if anyone wants to provide spoken comments using a computer, they'll be accepted through Zoom teleconference meeting. To address the board, or to address the commission rather, go to zoom.us/join. Meeting ID is 916-4155-9499. You'll be asked to enter your email address and your name, and request you identify yourself by name, as this will be visible online, and that's how we'll notify you. When you wish to speak on agenda item, click on raise hand. That should be on your screen, and you will be activated, and your speakers will be unmuted in your turn. And when called, please limit your remarks to the time allotted, and a time will be shown on the computer to help keep track of your time. If you are calling in using a phone, you can also do that. You should be calling 1-669-900-6833. Again, the meeting ID is 916-4155-9499. And when you wish to speak on agenda item, hit *9 on your phone, and we'll know that you wish to speak. Those are our Zoom instructions for the evening. And I guess I would just add, for those who are in the chamber, if anybody is in the chamber or comes later, they should fill out a speaker card and provide that to Medina Klicheva, who's sitting at the front right of the chamber, and you will be called when the item that you want to speak on is up. With that, I think we're ready, Chair, for the roll call and bringing the meeting to order.
And I will conduct the roll call. Chair Lawing.
Present.
Vice Chair Suma.
Present.
Commissioner Chang.
Here.
Commissioner Heckman.
Present.
Commissioner Regdal.
Here.
Commissioner Ruparvar.
Present.
Commissioner Templeton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. Okay. I understand that there are no speakers at this point. I'll ask again. There are none in chambers, and I don't see any online. And I've not heard of any agenda changes, additions, or deletions. Assistant Director Tanner, did you want to give a city report tonight or not?
There are no changes or deletions. That's correct. I will just simply update, perhaps since we're all together. I know there's been quite a few emails that have gone back and forth regarding just kind of the protocols. Obviously, you're all here who are in chamber, which is great. I'm sorry I cannot be with you tonight. Just following our best advice that when you do feel sick, to stay home. And so I am feeling sick and I am staying home, but I'm able to at least Zoom in to be with you all. So that's excellent. Just want to give an update that we will, as of yesterday, as of Monday, some of the changes that have occurred that we would expect to see in place until further notice would be that we can meet in a hybrid mode as we are meeting tonight. Masks are optional for members of the public and for board members, and that members of the public will not have to be have to have their vaccine or negative test screen to come into the chamber. And so those protocols have been dropped that we had talked about before. So pretty much members of the public and commission can decide if they want to wear a mask, and vaccination or negative test is no longer required to come into the chamber. You'll notice we did update the staff report this evening, both the agenda to show the strikeout of those protocols, just to try to make it clear. And so you'll see those protocols removed in the future. We also did update today's staff report just to have a fuller table of current projects that are underway in planning and transportation and planning and development services in the transportation office. So you should have received that via email yesterday evening. That was a slight change to the previous report that had been published. But other than that, there are no changes. We do have a couple items coming up at upcoming council meetings, but I will save that for the end when we talk about future meeting items so that we can kind of jump into the retreat and we can talk about that at the end. But I am open for any questions if any commissioners have any questions.
Questions from commissioners? Nope. Okay, so the agenda action items start on staff page 8. And just to review the 3 sort of subsections there are, sorry? The first one is potential items for the 22 work plan. And then the second one is process improvements with respect to commission, staff, et cetera. And then getting onto the draft work plan in terms of, I'll say, starting on that. The objective tonight is not to finish a document. The objective really is to structure what we want to do for the year. And if we get that done, we will get that done, then we can get to a draft with the help of staff and work through, more of the details in subsequent meetings. Any questions on that in terms of process? Okay, so the first one has a few items, and as you also see at the end, additional topics suggested by commissioners are on the table if people choose to do that. So we might as well just go straight down this list, but I just want to make a couple of comments here. One is just, we just can't underestimate how huge the housing element is, period, in terms of what we have to work on this year. I mean, that's going to take a lot of meetings and a lot of analysis. And when it gets into some of the details like programs, we might want to do multiple meetings or smaller groups or something. So just to understand that that is going to be a big chunk by definition of our assignment this year. It only happens every 10 or 12 years. So, and then the second thing, the only other comment I'd make is that the council just took some action on the California Avenue area, and they're going to do essentially an 18-month study. And Assistant Director Tanner could take questions on this one. But the question for us would be, if we want to sort of suspend this for a while until council gets going, because we don't want to duplicate it and we don't want to be on a different kind of trajectory than they are, particularly with an 18-month consulting project underway to take a complete comprehensive view, which is kind of what we were saying needed to be done there. So I think we're both on the same page, council and PTC. The question is, do we want to put any cycles in on it now, i.e. throughout 22, or does that end up kind of being a 23 project? So just with those two comments, then I just open it for questions. comments or whatever. And, this is, we're not sitting around lounge chairs, but this is a more casual setting, and we're not taking motions or anything. So you can, Giselle can raise her hand, which she's done already. Great. That's a way to participate quick. And others can try the light system here, but feel free to just jump in and be respectful of your colleagues and just have a conversation. But first, from far, far away, Commissioner Rupivar.
Thank you. So I just had a maybe like a sort of housekeeping question on this, but how many do we think we can realistically get through of these projects in the next year? And then are we thinking about stack ranking them? What are people's thoughts on that? Because if we put like 7 things in the work plan, but we're realistically only going to do 2, and then should we think about, going through them, like prioritizing what we want to do? Thoughts? Anyone?
I'm nodding,
Ed,
but other
Ed,
thoughts?
what do you think? I mean, I'm kind of directing it to you, Ed. How are you thinking we approach this?
I think that makes sense, which is, it depends on the size of the project, which is the first thing, I mentioned, and how much we can accomplish given the other things that are going to come to us naturally. So I think both of those are in order.
Yeah, and I'll just make one more comment based on what you said. I'm really into the California Avenue. I think that's such an important topic, and I would love to have it be part of our work plan, but it does feel a bit premature. If the council is going to have a comprehensive study, we should, in my opinion, take it up after, once we have all of that information. But I'm open to what other people think. I mean, I think it's one of my top ones that I want to look at, but again, I feel like it's premature.
I'll jump in. One of my thoughts with respect to specifically that issue about whether it's premature or not is I'd love to ask Assistant Director Tanner about the process, because it sounds like there is a consultant that's already been hired. And I'm wondering who is council giving that consultant the background, because it may be worthwhile for us to have a short session with that consultant to be like, this is kind of our laundry list of our wish list. Now, obviously the consultant's going to have to then talk to all the stakeholders and prioritize, but that way we at least are coming in at the beginning saying, these are what we're hoping for. And that way they don't come to us and then find out, oh, wait, there's all this stuff that the commission was interested in. And I haven't looked at.
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner Chang. And let me try to lay out some of the pieces that are in motion. If you get lost, there are several of them. So please do ask me again, and I can repeat it or help along the way. So maybe just chronologically, kind of what's happening this calendar year, 2022, is we have issued a request for proposal. And by we, I mean the city manager's office issued a request for proposals for an economic development consultant. And so those proposals are in, we're interviewing those consultants soon. So hopefully they'll be under contract and ready to go. I would say definitely by the middle of the year, if not sooner. And then at the same time, the city manager's office is hiring what's called an assistant to the city manager role that would be focused on economic development. And that, I believe, is just recently posted. So again, hopefully someone recruited and on board, ready to go in the next 2 to 3 months. So that would put us around June for both of those additional resources. And then we and Planning and Development Services have a consultant who's already working on a pretty small scope, but really I think will dovetail really well with the oncoming consultant, looking at what are best practices for vibrant retail just in general, and kind of making some recommendations specifically for land use changes or zoning code changes that we might consider as Palo Alto to help support vibrant retail, whether it be a walkable retail district like downtown or Cal Ave, an auto-oriented retail district like we have in El Camino, or more neighborhood serving retail. So I think we'll have some good timing in that as that study that's kind of high level is getting concluded. We'll have these additional resources coming on board, and they'll be able to do, the consultant and the assistant to the city manager, just some additional lifting that we're not able to do just as planning, on our own. So those pieces are in play. And I think maybe a fourth thing to add would be that council has asked us, and by us, it would be Planning and Development Services and Office of Transportation, to look at solving the parking issue in Cal Ave. And so that would be a proposal for what's called a subscription in lieu program, which essentially would allow for land use changes that require more on-site parking via a subscription program to some of the publicly available parking spaces that are in Cal Ave. So those are things council's already asked us for. And so I think a discussion tonight amongst the commission, kind of giving some more color perhaps to that, some more ideas to that, really helps us as staff know what you're thinking and things you're hearing or seeing in the community as well. So again, happy to repeat that. I know it's a lot. Consultant, staff person in the city manager's office, ongoing study in planning and development services, and request for council to look at the parking on Cal Ave. So those are the four things that are in play.
Wasn't there though also a third consultant that was going to do this 18-month study?
I believe that's the consultant that's coming on, and maybe I'm mistaken, but there was previously a consultant to help the council create the RFP that's been released. So that consultant was the Good City Company, and I think their contract is maybe concluding soon, but we don't manage that one, so I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, I think there is one, but I think the point here, which is good, is we need to stay in the right sync with the consultants and the council so that obviously we're heard and our concerns are taken into consideration. We don't get sort of left behind, but we don't kind of get out ahead of the parade as well. Is that basically what you were saying, Commissioner Chang?
Yes. Yes. I just want to make sure that our input isn't coming too late, right, or too early. Mm-hmm.
So maybe as we write this work plan, we try to frame that and say that, we want to participate in the planning for Cal Ave, whatever the wording is, as applicable to the consultant's work and the council's agenda. Did you have your?
Yeah.
We also have this little hard to read substitute buttons here. So
sorry, Chair, sorry. Ms. Starlack is noting in the chat, and maybe this is what you're referring to, is a study for California Avenue that would be around the closure conversation. So that would be, I guess, a fifth aspect of things that are happening. And so
right.
Ms. Starlack, I don't know if your shop would be ultimately handling that, but again, that just came out. We just got direction 2 weeks ago to do that. So that is not a firm that we know yet who they'll be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, so that's what I was thinking too. We actually have four overlapping consultants and one new person in the city manager's office. So once all those people are I like Commissioner Chang's idea about meeting to kind of get a framework and to understand how those people are going to work together and what their various roles will be and how they interact. So once those people are identified, maybe it would be good to have an early kind of study session and have them present the areas they're going to be in charge of and whatnot. And for us to maybe briefly let them know what some of our concerns are. I like that idea.
Any others on Cal Ave issue?
Well, I just want to be clear that I think there's two pieces, right? There's Cal Ave, which is retail and transportation, has components of retail and transportation and planning and all sorts of things. But then there's like the broader retail question. So I don't want us to say, oh, we're interested in retail and then only focus on Cal Ave, because obviously there's the other people who are, I want to make sure that we look at both issues.
Yeah, Cal Ave is small Roman numeral 4 here, and small Roman numeral 3 is retail. So any comments that people want to make on retail in general? There were some things on this year's agenda as we got, so we can talk about those too. Yeah. Art.
I'm trying out our new old technology and flipping my switch, but I don't know if it's showing up
It's
as
not. at all.
Okay.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah, I mean, up and down. Yeah, it's dim. I
It
wonder if that's telling me something. All right. My fellow commissioners are already kind of like deep into the detail, and I'm still trying to get my arms around sort of the totality of the work plan. And one thing I noticed with the updated staff report that came out, where they provided this table of when things are anticipated to be coming to the PTC, which is on packet pages 10 and 11 of the revised staff report. What I see is some, but not total meshing with some of these items in our section 1 discussion of potential items for the work plan. Specifically, I think that item 1, housing element update, we've got some of that shown here in our schedule. Traffic safety improvements, I'm not really clear if we have that. We do have a lot of parking and bicycle references coming to us. So as we go through this, I'm interested in maybe a little more explanation of whether traffic safety improvement is broader than what is already looks like it's coming to us. Retail, we've talked about. There is some retail in our anticipated schedule. Cal Avenue is kind of a mixed bag. As somebody's mentioned, we've got the parking and the closures are shown at the end of the table. And the broader retail discussion will of course include Cal Ave, but I appreciate the commissioner's comments that we don't want to focus on Cal Ave because we had a lot of retail areas in town. So I'm not sure if that one's covered. And then neighborhood planning, that is one I think that would maybe be fruitful for some discussion, because other than the North Ventura item in what's anticipated to come to us, I don't see anything else. And so that's an area where really I think we could take some initiative if that's the will of the commission, because I'm not seeing a lot of that already coming to us.
Yeah, I think tonight it's possible that might be one that we dig in on the most. So.
Chair, do you want to have Ms. Starlack address the traffic safety or I don't know, Commissioner Chang, if you want to speak to what your more fuller intent was under the traffic safety topic?
Yeah, let's start there with Commissioner Chang.
Sure. So I did it not knowing the full universe of all the things that might be on the commission's plate. But early on when I was appointed, a couple interested citizens reached out to me and sort of said, oh, the city's not necessarily tracking which intersections or parts of the city have the most traffic accidents or pedestrian accidents, or difficulties. And so I thought that towards the end of last year, I remember one commission meeting where we were asked, what would we want to see a study session on? And so one of my thoughts was, I think it would be really informative to understand where are the accidents happening in the city. Particularly, I think that would also inform any neighborhood planning or retail or a lot of bike and pedestrian issues, because then we would all have the same background and understanding. And just from a personal interest standpoint, that's why I was interested in becoming involved with the PTC, is because of traffic safety issues, in particular that of students commuting to school. But I mean, in general, that's where I feel the pain a lot when I'm going through Palo Alto. So thank you.
I think this is Commissioner Temple light. Okay.
Thank you. I just want to +1 to what Commissioner Chang just said. It's the Planning and Transportation Commission, and we do spend a tremendous amount of investment on the planning topics that come before us. and we want to see more. We always reach out and ask to our transportation colleagues to bring more to us and help us get involved and hear the community's voice. And that's really important because I know you're doing the work, whether it comes before the commission or not, but being able to be heard is incredibly important. And Commissioner Chang is hearing it from people in her neighborhood. I'm hearing it from people that I speak with. There's a lot of concern among families with children that have to bike themselves to school or walk to school, but it's also broader than that, right? And even on this California Avenue discussion, remember the tragedy that happened recently where the young man was killed. Like, these are conversations that are really important to our community. So I just want to plus one and say that we need to be taking this a lot more seriously and having more meaningful dialogue with the transportation department. Thank you.
So Commissioner Chang, would you say that is a lot of data gathering and problem identification, and then see ways in which we can kind of put visibility on it and maybe suggest some changes?
Yes, because I think where I stand is I don't know what the department has and doesn't have, nor do I know what is feasible or not feasible from a staffing standpoint. But as a starting point, where I hear neighborhood conversation is, oh my gosh, there's this intersection, or did you hear so-and-so's kid was hit on a bike, or did you hear that this person crossing the street was almost hit or was hit? And so I'd like to, if to the extent that it's possible, I would love just basic data on where the incidents happen in our city, from fender benders to pedestrian accidents to cyclist accidents. And then that will help inform us as to whether or not anything, we want to do anything else. But it definitely is, when I talk to people about the city, like, that's what comes up in everyday conversation is, I saw this accident here, I wonder what that was, or so-and-so was hit, so that that's what prompted that interest.
Commissioner Templeton?
Thanks. Just a quick add on to that. Like, it's not just about making sure that we're looking at the data and that we have a clear idea of what the projects are coming up for improvement in the transportation team, but it's also accountability, right? When we have incidents, when we have collisions, we've tried to figure out how to coordinate with the transportation department about it, and to see that, and indeed improvements are being made, and that this incident, that something's being done about it, and it's not happening. And we've tried various different avenues, and the people want to know. People want to be able to engage directly with the department publicly about accountability and how you're going to improve the streets around here. Thanks.
Did you want to make any response? No, not necessary, Ms. Starlack.
Sure, I can. Thanks so much for the comments. I think it would be a great idea for us to share with you the data that we have, and talk to you about our process for how changes get made. This year, we're going to be kicking off our bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan update. And I think that a lot of conversations, we'll be having a lot of conversations about areas in town. We'll be looking at the data, historical collision data, figuring out where those spots are in town that really need some more attention. El Camino, as the unfortunate tragedy, fatality that happened here a couple of years ago, we're about to engage again with Caltrans on that. So transportation is looking at the data. One of our projects that we're working on at San Antonio and Charleston, actually, we took on because we looked at the data and saw that the #1 location for collisions was there. So I just want to dispel this notion that we're not looking at the data. We look at the data and we're trying to do what we can. Oftentimes we have to deal with multiple jurisdictions. So for example, El Camino is not our road. And so we have to work with Caltrans on that. Things on Foothill, Oregon, Page Mill, they're not ours, they're run by the county. So, you know, there's just a lot of coordination, but we want to do that work. That's what we're here to do. So I'm happy to, come back with information for you. It would be really efficient for us to put that together, do that as part of the bike plan update, since we'll have a consultant on board to do that collection and analysis for us. So maybe we can do it that way so that we can be really efficient. But we're happy to do what the commission, we're happy to answer your questions about how we do our work.
And the last thing you mentioned is happening this year, right?
Yes.
Right. Commissioner Reckdahl?
Okay. Commissioner Chang brought up for Cal Ave, we want to close the loop more frequently. And I think this is another area where we want to close the loop more frequently and not do it yearly, but maybe have a monthly update where we say, what events, what kind of accidents have occurred in the last month that are noteworthy? And what are the trends? Doesn't have to be a big presentation, just a part of the staff update. I think that'd be very useful. And just in general, more frequent, shorter updates are better than less frequent, bigger updates.
So I just did want to make a +1. I just wanted to say +1 on Commissioner or Giselle. I don't know. Are we using first names today? What are we doing?
It's casual today.
Use my first name. I like Giselle.
All right. On Giselle's comment about what are we going to do here with respect to prioritization? Because I think that there's like must-dos, right? That staff is, that the city's already working on, or that there is a timeline associated with it. And then there's also like some limited amount of free meetings. And so perhaps what would be helpful is if we force ranked what those priorities would be. Like if I were doing a whiteboarding meeting, I would have all the ideas and have everybody have 3 Post-it notes and then stick them next to it, because then we could see kind of where the gestalt is for the commission, and then we can have a more informed discussion. But like things like the housing element, like we have to do it, but then there's a question about how much more additional time do we want to put on things that might fall out of the housing element, like the neighborhood planning, for example. So, and it sounds like there's a lot of excitement about the retail piece too. So I guess it would probably be helpful to indicate in our work plan where our priorities would be, right?
I think so. Yeah, totally. Yeah, Carrie? Oh, leftover. There are even ghost lights here. Okay, I'm just gonna hold it up here like this. Next week, we're putting it in ink, not pencil against yellow, so.
So my memory, so we actually went through this prioritization discussion last year in the inaugural year of the work plan. And my memory is, Brian, you weren't yet a commissioner?
Probably not.
Okay, so, but what makes tonight's discussion really even exciting, I'll say that, is here's what we listed our 3 priorities for last year. And this is on packet page 21. Time-sensitive council items, customer applications, and matters requiring annual review. So what is missing there is anything that we're taking an initiative to start, right? Because these are all reactive concepts that were our priorities last year. So I think consistent with what I'm hearing some of the other commissioners say, in coming up with our priorities this year, there's an opportunity to fold into that PTC initiated issues, but we have to think about it because we can't, for example, delay a time sensitive council issue to deal with something that we are initiating. So I don't know if maybe this PTC initiated things becomes item 3, or does it have to be item 4? But that's, I think, something we can talk about. And it is supposed to be part of our work plan, that prioritization concept.
Yeah, probably item 4, but I think that we can't chip this in stone because of item 1. So we can get our list and it goes to here, and then some urgent things come to us from council. We're not going to get it done, which is why we should prioritize, because then we'll take off the bottom items and work on the ones above that. So I don't think we have to get to something that we know we're going to accomplish everything, because we don't know how much is going to get thrown at us. Council doesn't know how much is going to get thrown at us. But we should prioritize what we think is important.
Right. And I like the idea of adding that if it's going to be item 4, fine, because we should put in print this notion that we can be we can initiate, not just react.
I think that's the exact wording that should go in here. PTC initiated projects. I mean, I think that's perfect for that. So we can, to Giselle and Brian and others, we can sort of stack rank. We just have to understand that we're not going to get them all done realistically. And I think that for this kind of exercise, that's probably okay. And we just should get comfortable with that at the front end.
Yeah, I think that'll be helpful for staff too, because if it's the 10th thing, we're not going to get to it. So staff won't waste time on it.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Chair Lowing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Rectal's request for monthly collision data reports. That would be something that would need to be coordinated through the police department, because they're the ones who keep the data, and there's some privacy issues with some of that. So PD does provide a verbal report to our City School Transportation Safety Committee monthly, because that committee is tasked with looking at trying to fix things, and oftentimes it's around children, and those reports are verbal and really just reflect what's happening with youth on the streets. But if the commission wants collision data, it really needs to make a request to the police for that.
Would it be possible just to have high level trends, or is there some way to distill it down into big picture details and not have to worry about privacy issues?
Anonymized.
Yeah, the quality of the data at that point is somewhat, I mean, it's good. It kind of tells you what happened, but it doesn't really tell you what happened. So I mean, we can show you. So for example, I have access to historical data, but if you wanted like what happened last month, PD is really the best answer for that. I can grab data from the past 5 years up until I think December of 2020. I have all the historical data prior to December 2020, just because that's how the databases are all they lag behind by a year or two. But PD has the up-to-date fresh data. So that's kind of where we are with data.
So if we wanted to get PD data, what would be the route to get that?
I have a suggestion. Ms. Starlack, if you're already getting that data at a public meeting, then I don't think that Commissioner Rectal is suggesting any additional effort to collect it. I think he wants to just make sure that it's shared here as well after that, so that there's no additional work. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, well, that data basically only reflects what's happening with youth. So we'd have to ask PD to, I'm sure you want to hear more than just what's happening on the streets than just with youth. So we'd have to ask them to do some additional work.
The kind of thing I'd want to see is, how many car collisions were there last month? How many car bike and how many car pedestrian impact?
Right.
And then say over the last 6 months or over the last year, how is this? Because 1 month is very noisy. And so longer term trends are probably the better piece of data.
Right.
So it doesn't have to get in a lot of detail, but like right now, I have no idea how many car crashes there were last year in Palo Alto. I couldn't even guess. And I'm on the Planning and Transportation Commission. So it would be good to get us up to speed on just big picture. What kind of public safety do we have up there? Thank you.
Meanwhile, we have anecdotal evidence. I hear one every week about a child being hit by a car or colliding with a car, and maybe it's not reported, right? We don't necessarily even know, but look, we're a city that is very bike friendly. We want to make it not only popular, but we want to support that safely. And so I like your idea about having this conversation be a part of the bike pedestrian plan. That makes a lot of sense. But between conversations about that plan, we still need to find a way to discuss it in a public forum. And maybe there's another group or commission or committee or panel that where that happens. But even so, that communication is not coming to this group. Like, you want to talk about the bike plan, we're having another bike meeting next week or whatever, something like that. Just finding a way to have us collaborate a little bit more about that would be really awesome. Thanks.
Bart?
So I've been on the PTC a little over 2 years, and actually tonight's the first time we've really just focused right on this traffic safety and collision information. And so I think it's a new dialogue for us, and we're addressing staff again in the last 2+ years for the first time. So I feel like we've kind of got the message across to staff that we're interested in. And now that you know that, maybe you can explore what's possible, what's reasonably possible. I appreciate that staff is already stretched, and I'm not, honestly, personally, I'm not looking for an oral report once a month or every meeting. But if there's some data sheet that can be provided us that really you're already collecting the information at some interval, and it's just part of the staff report we get, and it's the kind of information that can be public because it'll be in the staff report, and we can review it. There's always a transportation representative at our meetings. And so if anybody has a question about it, we can ask it at the meeting. But I think that's what we're looking for, is really to explore, have transportation side explore, what can you do? And not tell us tonight, but talk amongst yourselves and see, how we as the PTC can be better informed.
Yeah, I hear that. I am respectful. I want to understand, or we just recently had the same conversation with our pedestrian and bicycle advisory committee. They wanted more data out of our police department, and our police department is unable to provide the reports that Payback wants. But I can go back to PD and ask and see what they are able to do. But I just want to note that our PD records department is very, very stretched, and so I don't want to speak for PD on what they can and cannot do. So I will check with them and see what they can provide as part of maybe like a table that gets attached to your agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So I just want to make sure that we've touched on everything on retail that anybody wants to touch on tonight, since there's so many consultants launching on this, but I wanted to be thorough and make sure there wasn't anything we missed. Okay, so next up is that neighborhood planning, and I don't think we have any members of the public here, but the idea here is to create the concept of what might be on the list of things that should be looked at as we literally in the housing element are going to probably be creating some new neighborhoods over the next 10 or 12 years, not over the next 10 or 12 months. And it's kind of in some sense the visioning statement, but more than that, it's what infrastructure is there and what support structure is there and so on. Again, I think this would be something we'll spend a couple meetings on maybe during the course of the year, and we're not trying to finish this tonight, but I think it's worth spending some time on tonight to see if we agree on what needs to be in it. So by way of introduction, that's what I put on the table, and just open it up. We can take a virtual whiteboard here. I can take notes on what we talk about. Want to start, Bart?
Sure. And I think what I'm going to bring up fits under this. I was thinking it would go under the additional topics, but let me just try it out. At our last meeting, when we were making recommendations on the housing sites, toward the end of the meeting, I made a motion regarding the low density area within a quarter mile of Caltrain. And after some discussion with our assistant city attorney, it was decided that my motion was really outside the agenda. And so it wouldn't be appropriate to discuss it at that meeting. And that was fine with me. I withdrew the motion. But part of that dialogue was we'll have to find a future agenda to put that on. And I'm not familiar with what that process would be to do that. I am interested in our commission having a discussion about, my concept there was this area, this low density residential area within a quarter mile of the California Caltrain station has been essentially protected in this round of site selections. That was part of the working group's dynamic, is they wanted to not touch that, and that's fine. And so I'm looking at the next RENA cycle, and the chair, you just mentioned, we're looking, as much as 10, 12 years out. That's on that item. Really what I was looking at is can we at least suggest to council that by the time we get to, I think it was 2029, which is 2 years before this next RENA cycle ends, that we are going to have a discussion about whether we want to look at upzoning in that low density residential area. So that's something that would be of interest to me to have the dialogue with the commission at some point this year, because it's 7 or 8 years out. I don't think there's urgency to it. And I don't know that after we have a discussion that the commission will want to move it forward with a recommendation to council. They may not, and that's fine. That's what we're here to talk about. But that's an example of an item when we're talking about neighborhood planning that I'd be interested in pursuing.
Okay. Yeah, right. Sorry? Oh. It's a multimedia situation here. Giselle, go ahead.
Thank you. So I agree with Bart +1. And then I also wanted to throw out, somewhat selfishly, because I live closest to the area, but we discussed Fabian Way in that area and the change from industrial and doing neighborhood planning as something we might want to consider as well. Adding the more dense housing, retail, and creating more of a neighborhood feel as industrial phases out.
Brian?
+1 for what Giselle just said about planning for the East Meadow Circle housing, and also I think maybe lumped into it, maybe not lumped into it along transport.
Yeah.
Because there's so many units that are likely to pop up there, and there really isn't the infrastructure there for those incoming units. The other areas that I thought about was, and I don't know how this fits into what we do versus what city council does, but Stanford Research Park again, looking forward for the next cycle. You know, it'd be great if Palo Alto had a nice plan for what could go there and we could take that to Stanford and say, here, let's do this. But yeah, those are my thoughts on neighborhood planning.
Well, just as a structured question, then I'll get to Keith and others. I was thinking of the beginning of this as a little bit higher up, where we're writing down things like, no, don't get mad when I use these numbers, but like the NVCAP started, where, you know, we have to have, what is the goal here? And the goal is going to be this, and it's going to be this. And, you know, we want this to be, you know, a mixture of this kind of housing and so on in general. And then maybe take that template as it applies to a particular neighborhood as we go further down the line, if it's going to be San Antonio or some of those other ones. So, but maybe the first one that I'm talking about is pretty easy, because we can chart the items that we want in there. And then we take that and look at some of the specific neighborhoods. I don't know, that I put that into a question. Shall we talk about, you know, the higher level thing in general of what do we want to be considered in a neighborhood plan? Keith? Oh,
That story is.
Thank you.
can we go
Thank
back
you.
to Zoom now?
Yeah, I'll associate my comments with Giselle and Bryna's and looking forward. I'm not as interested in Commissioner Heckman, I guess we're using first name, Snipe Bart's idea about, because I think I don't think we really know how some of these experiments are going to work. And I think it's sort of premature to look at upzoning in those areas. And I did have a question. Do you just want to do that for the CalAV 1/4 radii, or the other 2 train stations also?
When I looked at the mapping that Mr. Wong had provided, it seemed like that was the primary area that within a 1/4 mile had significant low density residential. So that was the nature of my motion at that last meeting. And that's where I think that, because I think that's the hardest work, is re-envisioning a conversion of low density. So I was really focused on that.
Okay. And I'm very interested in expanding the discussion with Stanford about how the research park may be providing a lot of the housing. And I don't know what this number is, but I think I said it recently. I still would like to know what percentage of the jobs are associated with the wonderful Stanford University, the research park, and their wonderful medical institutions in Palo Alto, because I think it would kind of put it into perspective a little bit for us. So not interested in going outside of the growth boundaries that exist and expanding into those areas, but that's kind of where I was thinking about it. And I also thought of this number 5 as being somewhat initiated by the PTC, with the understanding that our main job is to get done what the council and what staff need and applicants need us to do, and that would be kind of extra.
One of the PTC initiateds.
Yeah.
Bryna? Still on?
No.
Ghost. Must be Keith now.
Yeah, now I'm.
Okay.
I mean, one thing I think we can add value on is that there's a lot of things outside of our control, like VTA, schools, and we have to get that rolling early. And so this neighborhood planning really has to look at, what do you want in a vibrant neighborhood? And, you know, for example, especially if it's higher density, parks are essential. And so then we have to somehow either zone for the parks or acquire the land. It's there's a lot of front work that has to be done early. And I think we have to identify what front work has to do and who has to be involved, and get them involved.
Yeah, the timing on that's going to be interesting relative to how council processes the housing element and some of these required upzones that they're going to have to initiate. So that's going to require some close coordination, I think.
And also council's discussion of the housing element programs will be very interesting, because they will be telling us what to be looking for. So a lot of our work is going to come out of that discussion.
Well, let's take a look at that. One of the things that I thought is maybe we could do more work than we're being asked for on the programs. So then when it comes from the housing element working group, we can really drill down on that and talk about, with our presumed advanced expertise, how some of these programs would work, what we really recommend there. Because as Keith knows from being on that working group, we're going pretty fast through those programs and they're kind of a high level. And I'm not sure, frankly, that we're going to want to this body's going to want to go through that fast, because there's some real implications for if we get the programs wrong or they're not enough or whatever. So we may choose to spend a good amount of time getting drilled down there. You agree? Because you're fully up to speed on this stuff.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, we spend a lot of time in this housing element work group, but examining the programs, we haven't drilled down at all.
Right.
It's been at a very high level.
Right.
And I think that would be our job, is to drill down and do the heavy lifting so that council has an informed decision.
Yeah. And the second half of that meeting is the next meeting of the housing element working group. The co-chairs have a postmortem meeting tomorrow on the last meeting. And one of my concerns I'm putting on the table in public right now is that I'm not sure that the housing element working group can get there with the level of detail that is needed to take it to the council. Otherwise, they're going to have to be putting together, multiple ad hocs and spending a gazillion hours on it. Not that all of them can be created for every neighborhood, before the housing element is signed off. And as I said before, the timing is a little bit tricky, but we just may want to go deeper. Yep. Brian?
So am I understanding correctly that you're saying the housing element working group isn't going to be able to put in, or isn't going to be able to put in the amount of time that's needed for some of these programs, and that therefore when it gets to us, we spend a little bit more time on it in order to flesh out the programs a little bit more for council? Is that what you're saying?
I think so. And obviously the expertise level here is a little higher than in general the working group. So,
I mean, I am concerned because, I was just reading an article about a pretty neat new application for 100% affordable housing on El Camino. But because it's affordable, it doesn't need to have the green space that would normally be required of a development. And so to Keith's point, when everything is being changed, when the zoning is being changed, if we don't allow for the park space in those areas that are that have been earmarked in the housing element plan for as potential low income housing, then what's going to happen is the applications are going to start coming in, and then we're going to have a mishmash of stuff there, and no parks and no room for a school or whatever it is that we might need over there. But then timing wise, it sounds like, this housing element needs to be approved by the beginning of next year, right? And then the zoning needs to follow how soon afterwards?
over the course of roughly 6 months. Is that about right, Keith or Rachel?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think I will want to talk with Claire about the timing, and obviously, Ed, you're the chair of the working group, so you can talk with the staff as well, just about how much time the PTC will have with it, because we are under some pretty tight state deadlines to get it done. So I think there's also kind of a way to think about it as not only there's the housing element itself, so what goes into it, but then maybe to the prioritization point, some of the programs that we're going to want to tackle sooner than later. And so there is opportunity for PTC to kind of tackle, like, even after the element is, off your desk and onto council, and maybe after council adopts the policies and programs, to do more thinking about them, to hold study sessions on the topics, to dive in deeper, so that, the city and the public, and the council can make informed decisions. Just because we know we want to move on a policy doesn't mean we've totally decided everything about it. There's so much work that goes into it. And so I think there's some opportunities later this year to even do that. even while we're, waiting for that. And perhaps just on the neighborhood planning, I do think there is an opportunity for us to really think about as a commission, like what is the city's approach to neighborhood planning? To your point, Ed, around like what is a complete neighborhood? What does that look like? And to think about, how as we contemplate upzoning, are we also adding in the other accoutrements that make the neighborhood, complete? I think that's a very timely conversation.
Some of these considerations, like no limited open space, has to do with one of the state laws. I'm not sure which it is, but so that's not something that's negotiable. And it's a concession to get the developers to, not have to pay as much money to get the building up. The second thing that you mentioned is that, it's not going to leave the housing element working group with any recommendations on where affordable housing should go up. Not even sure if that's going to get into it, other than once we know there's 57% of the homes have to be, below market rate, basically. So over the RENA cycle, that's the goal. But council has to make some decisions and watch the development. And if at the end of that, they could say, well, we can't put up any more market rate because, we only can put up developments, and maybe more incentives get done 8 years from now or something. So, Carrie?
Thank you. Just thinking about what Bryna said and what Ms. Tanner said, I think the way the PTC might be able to help is if we had either some kind of study session or some other way to discuss what are possible area plans that we could have, so that we know, that would include some of our newly identified lots for densification or whatnot, but also make sure that we have evaluated what's around it, that there are parks, there are schools, and be able to develop that idea of what I think Rachel said, what's a complete neighborhood, like doing these onesie twosies with North Ventura, and what was the other one that we just were talking about, but the area plans, it's not going to be enough for the amount of housing we're adding. So we need to figure out, how do you evaluate that? And that might be something a PTC could help with. So it's just a thought.
Yeah.
That's that higher level that you were talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, then. Great, +1.
Okay, this fuzzy button here means Bart, right?
That's me.
I'm quoting you,
So,
dude.
Yeah, yeah. Dim, I think is
Dim.
my term.
I was upgrading you then.
So I guess here's my high level concern. So in my time on the PTC, the first thing that I would consider neighborhood planning, that the one thing that's come to us is the NV cap. And the working group for that NV cap, which I think included a number of our current commissioners, spent extraordinary amount of time studying that area and looking at variations and plans. It ultimately came to us, and we made we actually sent staff away to gather some more information, come up with some other options. Focused on this concept of financial feasibility, which was one of the stated goals from the council when they initiated the NV cap process. And so we made recommendations based on financial feasibility, and those recommendations went to council. And the council majority of the council ended up supporting I'll call it option 1. It was the lowest density of the options that came out of that process. And by extrapolation from the financial information we got regarding the mid-level option, the price tag, the public subsidy price tag for that option 1 is going to be north of $200 million. And so I found that disheartening, because all of that effort has gone into a plan that looks beautiful on paper. it would be an idyllic neighborhood. But I don't believe that there's any realistic possibility that that's going to happen because the price tag is too high in terms of public dollars. And so when we're talking about planning other areas of our city, I think we have to be able to rein in the optimism and plan with realism. And I mean, if we want parks, all the land in Palo Alto is super expensive. And so it's going to cost something to get those parks. And so I think that public subsidy aspect of this has to be a part of the dialogue from the beginning, so that we don't get to the back end and just approve something that doesn't pencil on its own, will require significant public subsidy, but we have no plan for it. Because nobody wants to waste their time, planning for a pretty picture that never gets built.
One council member said from up here that right now everything is infeasible housing wise because there's no substantial public funding. I mean, I think that's changing a little bit, but 57% of those units in that cycle are going to need some help somehow. So when you say, I don't remember the word you use, but trade-off, the trade-off is either we miss the RENA numbers or we fund it. I mean, just as simple as that. And people are making their bets now on what's going to happen. And I think most of them are betting that we're going to miss the cycle because there's not that much money out there in the next 10 years. So that's a challenge to not so much this group as it is the council and the city. Yeah. Carrie?
I would also add that all three plans from the NDCAP had parks.
Had what?
Had parks. This was, I mean, it was not optional. We have to have parks if that area is developed. So, while aspects of it might not have been feasible, the vision of what it's going to be like to live in Palo Alto, we wanted to make sure that applied to that area too. And I think there's a balance there.
Doria?
Thank you. So I kind of think that the idea that the public would subsidize all of this is a little bit of a strict notion. I think that we are going to have to, in the future, find other sources of income as a city, and the state is going to have to figure out how they want to contribute to all this housing, the subsidized, because the market we don't have to worry about. And so I thought it was framed for me a little bit in a very limited way. And I think the other thing that we should remember is that zoning is a tool that limits the value of property through the uses that can be allowed, and that is something we need to consider as the value of property escalates exponentially and in a seemingly endless cycle of failure to provide for the people that need to be a part of this community. So I would rather see new sources of income and new ways, public, private, and new taxes perhaps in the city, and that's not in our purview, but we got to get money from someplace, and maybe the business tax should be focused on these kinds of solutions to provide reasonable and safe housing for the people that need to be a part of this community. So I don't see it as narrowly as just this public subsidy.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some projects that can go up affordable with tax credits, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Is one of the things that you're saying that the value of the appreciation of the land and the building should be taken more seriously into account by developers? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I thought that was kind of what you were saying, because as the value goes up, that's not calculated in the rents based on what it cost, but the capital appreciation is another return on investment to the developer.
I'm not sure that I was saying that, but
Okay.
what I was saying was that when we have, for instance, we spoke about the PF zone property where MacArthur Park is. And having that be PF zoned has a great value to us as a community. We don't own it, but because it limits the uses and therefore it is a more attractive site to have below market rate housing. So I'm advocating that we continue to be creative about using our zoning to limit uses and thereby retaining some properties at lower values for investors that will be available, then more readily available for subsidized housing, if that makes sense. I'm not a business person, so.
Okay.
And I'm also hoping that in this RENA cycle, I'm hoping at the regional and state level, we have identified a better process, because the RENA housing cycles have, as I've said before, each cycle has failed bigger in that they all provide market housing and they all fail bigger each subsequent cycle in subsidized housing. So I think I would be very much in favor of rethinking this and rethinking, because it doesn't seem to be real. And so I'm hoping we'll have something much better in 8 years.
Somebody else would be sitting here handling these problems then.
Yeah.
Yeah, Keith.
I didn't say I had the answer.
Yeah, I mean, this gets to be a big discussion. I think maybe we're going outside of what we need for the priorities. But let's talk about the parks and NVCAP. I mean, the fact that we weren't able to get enough parks in there in NVCAP was purely because the impact fees were inappropriate. If we had appropriately sized impact fees, they should be able to, for any size development, provide sufficient parks for that development. And right now we don't, they're not calculated correctly. And that's the Parks and Rec is hearing that right now. And that will improve things. And same with affordable income. If we have the correct impact fees, or if we have the Palmer fix, that will help mitigate it. Affordable housing is really hard because the numbers are so big. But this is where we have to look at zoning and hold firm on zoning and zone for what you want. And if you want housing there, you have to zone for housing. If you zone for housing and or business, you're not going to get housing. So that's the other thing. You have to have appropriate impact fees and you have to have appropriate zoning.
Yeah, when we're talking about impact fees, I also think, I'm not informed fully on it, but I also wonder about the school impact fees, right? So like if you needed a new school in an area, are the amount of impact fees that are collected able to account for that? And if not, where would that be coming from, right? Like the district needs to collect the money somewhere. So it's just things to think about for
That is a whole nother ball of wax. We do not want to get into tonight.
But I mean, that is one of the challenges too, because it's the space, it's the building. I mean, even just renovating right now, the current, 50, 60-year-old schools has been difficult for the district.
So what, Bart?
Yeah, I don't know if Mr. Yang is here tonight, but I can chime in on school impact fees from my own work experience. Once upon a time, there was this negotiation that happened with developers when they came in with a project that was going to impact the school. And of course, any housing project that's not for seniors is going to impact the school. And so this negotiation would result in an agreement as to what their contribution would be. But developers felt that sometimes they were being held up, and they went to the state legislature. And now impact fees are wholly and completely decided upon by state law. And there's like a base amount, and there are some things that a school can show to step up a level or two, but there's no negotiation to happen. And so it's a great question, and it's sort of a lingering byproduct of Prop 13 in 1978 that has crippled our ability to provide what used to be the best education in the U.S. But we are powerless, even at the council level, to help the school districts with those items.
So for tonight, just to get this on the work plan, do we want to kind of do both, sort of chart out the higher level things, which might be fairly easy? And I'm not saying do it tonight, but I mean this year, chart out the parks and open space and levels of housing and so on, and then pick 2 or 3 particular areas to work on in more depth. Would that be a way to put it on the work plan? I mean, those areas to be determined later in consultation with maybe even council. Does that make sense, Rachel? From your standpoint? Others? Bart, were you going to say?
Yeah, I like that idea. And I think one thing that would help us in that is with the mapping that staff has done on the housing sites, the new housing sites, once that has been approved by the council and those are firm, then we can look at sort of where's the most density, what needs our attention the most, what areas of town, right? And prioritize that way, right? If one area is going to get 800 units, we want to maybe focus on that over this one over here that is going to have 350 possible new units. And staff can help us with that. And again, they've done a lot of the mapping. So it shouldn't be a lot of exercise once we know from council what makes the final cut.
And that's supposed to happen this month.
Right.
Makes
I would
a lot
just,
of sense, I think, that plan.
I would just add, or maybe to also +1, the conversation. I mean, I think as a planner, I think there is a discussion, particularly in the Bay Area, around what is the way to plan for additional housing and new neighborhoods. Is it the specific plans or area plans or coordinated area plans? Different communities have different names. Is that the vehicle? And we saw that in the grand jury report that came out around affordable housing, kind of invoking that in order to get affordable housing, you need to have coordinated area plans. And maybe that is a way to do it. Is it the way that we want to approach it in Palo Alto? I think maybe to speak to Bart's comments, coordinated area plans can be a lot of time and money. And so how do we want to make the best use of that? Or is it some other set of vehicles and planning tools that are appropriate for neighborhood planning that might be not just more efficient, but get the outcome that we want, which is, a robust neighborhood that meets all the needs. So I think having this discussion is really timely because I think it will also inform the rest of the housing cycle that we're going to be in terms of how are we approaching it? What grants do we apply for? Things of that nature.
Yeah, and I think staff can come up with the varieties of ways of doing that because the area plans did not get a lot of love from the council the other night, but also Director Late said one reason for that is you only have limited resources, and that takes a lot of time to do. Now, I don't know if his answer was that takes a lot of time to do now before we can do any, or if it means it takes a lot of time to do over 10 years. If it's the latter, I'm not as concerned. If it's the former, obviously we are concerned. So you can chart for us here the 3 basic ways to do it, and then we can take a look at that as applied to a given area. Bart? Oh, you're not as dim anymore. It came right up there. So is that enough for you, Rachel, to kind of chart this as one of the objectives?
Yes, maybe just I'll try on kind of how I would think about putting that into the work plan template that we have this year, which is obviously different than last year. So what I would put is, and what you would then see, because we'll bring it back to you all before it goes to the council, like the project or goal would be kind of explore neighborhood planning. I'm making this up, but I'll make it nicer when I bring it back. Something like explore, appropriate approach to neighborhood planning in Palo Alto, or maybe a best approach or ideal approaches. And then we'll talk about the impacts, which you've described. I think the timeline, resources needed. What I'm thinking that this would be is maybe a series of a few study sessions on the topic that we would have. And the measure of success would be that we maybe have some type of consensus on what a complete neighborhood is and kind of what approaches Palo Alto might use in neighborhood planning. And maybe it'll be different. Some neighborhoods might need different types of planning. And then maybe to Giselle's earlier point, it does ask us to put whether something is a high priority or a low priority into the template. And I'm not sure what that impact of putting it high or low is, other than perhaps the signal to council. If this gets done this year, great. But if not, we could move it to next year. Maybe that's a way to think about, high priority, like needs to get done, and low priority is like, we'd love to get to it. But if we don't, it's okay to move it up to the next year, perhaps.
I think what we were saying is in terms of initiated plans, that's pretty high priority for PTC, but we also have to be realistic that that might not be a 1-year project. So the duration of that might take a couple of years to get all of that done. You can tell us tactically how that gets into the work plan, and it might just be a carryover item in 23.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, so that one's in the can, as they say in the film world, right? So are there any other ones that we haven't talked about that we should? None were submitted in advance, but if there's any others, otherwise we'll move to process. Otherwise we'll move the process to process.
I'd like to discuss retail a little more. There's a lot of issues about retail and zoning and what you allow for. Do you want all nail salons down California Avenue, or do you want to push them to the side streets? And there's a lot of discontent with how our retail is managed right now. And so maybe investigating that would probably be beneficial.
The question on that is, are we going to get out ahead of the 3 or 4 consultants that are being hired to work on that? The economic manager and the staff person and the.
This is more general. Outside of all the staff consultants and stuff is for Cal Ave. Are we looking at general retail?
No, I don't think that's right. Is it, Rachel? Isn't it for retail in general? What makes vibrant retail? And
yeah, we don't have. So I think the only Cal Ave focused consultant, which is the least close to being hired, would be the one that's going to explore what the closing Cal Ave could look like, or closing portions of it to vehicle traffic. The others are at this point more general. I think they could and probably will have some focus areas. So for example, the economic development staff person and the consultant they have, I don't think they'll do the same work in every area of town, but it's not exclusively for California Avenue.
Okay, then I'm happy. I would thought that we were just concentrating on Cal Ave.
I think there's 2 items. I think there's like retail in general and retail across the city. And then there's like a Cal Ave topic. And what I understood the Cal Ave topic to be, and maybe this is good to clarify, is kind of looking at retail's part of it. And that will kind of be part of the retail component, but also looking at both the broader neighborhood, some of the parking issues that are hamstringing retail, which are Cal Ave specific. And I don't know, Commissioner Suma, if you want to say more about your concept with the Cal Ave Mayfield neighborhood planning, maybe that will help to illuminate it more for the other commissioners.
Well, I'm not totally sure what you're asking. I don't have a plan, but the Cal Ave Business District is parked differently than any other business district. It's not just based on square footage. It's also based on a very detailed use. So for instance, the most heavy parking requirement per square foot is a fast food or a walk-in carry-out restaurant. And so say for instance, and this is a real, I don't know how frequently this happens, but this is a real example. There was a individually owned copy shop, and as a copy shop, and that was the last use when the district was closed. So as a copy shop, it had a very low parking requirement, and a frozen yogurt store, which there's no ice cream store on Cal Ave. would have been a really great addition to CalAv, I think. Couldn't go in because although they're both allowed ground floor retail uses, one had a very different parking requirement and they're locked in. So not to say I have the answer, but to say that maybe that is part of what needs to be looked at on CalAv. And I know it will be a sensitive issue because at the same time, we have to balance the neighborhood impacts. And I don't suspect they're feeling them right now, but especially Evergreen Park and the Mayfield neighborhood itself have parking permit programs that allow nearby workers to move in. However, I think it's a very nuanced issue, and state law actually does allow nearby merchants to be in residential parking permit areas. Just not clear if it's clear that office workers are not explicitly allowed, and that hasn't been tried much in the courts, and so it wasn't incorporated into the thinking. But I also think this is going to, a lot of how CalAv ends up being, the business district being parked, will have a lot to do with how remote work is going to pan out. So that's why I'm glad that we're not going to make decisions on this for a while and after all this consultant work, because maybe 18 months we'll know more about that. But, you know, the experts that I listen to, that I read, feel that some degree of remote working will, some percentage will stay, especially in more liberal areas. I just read something in the New York Times this morning. So those are just some of the things I think about with CalAv that's a little bit different than other business areas. Is that what you were wanting me to talk about?
That is one thing. And I was thinking more, I think you had expressed kind of just an idea around, and maybe you can correct where I paraphrased incorrectly, just that there's quite a bit of change happening in the surrounding neighborhood. So there's a retail aspect, but also the neighborhood surrounding CalAv. There's, you know, different developments planned, and that might be an area to focus on, but perhaps that falls under the broader like neighborhood planning topic, or I don't know if you see it as a separate topic.
Well, there is a lot of development planned for the Mayfield neighborhood, which is very mixed use right now, but it does have a lot of residential uses. I think that's kind of what I was thinking about. And but I think those things will be considered as part of this 18-month consultant specifically for the CalAv area. And I do think the traffic impacts, if all the workers came back, there would be, and the street is closed, what are the impacts there? Because it actually would be hard, sort of hard to get out of CalAv, the CalAv area and Mayfield area and go south on El Camino. It would be a lot harder. So, but you know, those are all things I'm sure will be considered.
Yeah, so I just want to reference this year's plan where we had retail recovery, direct staff and PTC to quickly evaluate and propose changes, diverse retail uses like food and educational. I think that's over. I don't think we need to do that quickly. And I don't think we need to do it this year at all because of these consultants that are going on. So that's one that was urgent because of the pandemic. We got to some of them and not all of them, but I think it's an example of something that we shouldn't bring forward. So to me, that kind of puts the exclamation point on the retail issue for 2022. Yeah, Brian.
I mean, to me, to summarize our earlier retail discussion, it sounded like the only thing that we thought might be high priority for the PTC this year regarding retail would be to have a study session towards the end of the year after all these new folks are on board, so that we can give any input and they can tell us what, you know, how kind of the plan for going forward. So I think that was the rest of everything else. It sounded like we were saying we can kind of push off to wait until the consultants have made more progress.
I think so. Are there any other views on that? But okay. Okay, so to the process.
I just want to know, I think what I would like to recommend is that we do put some of the retail items that council's referred to us on our plan, but kind of noting that we want to coordinate with the broader city resources. So we're not just going to like move forward until everything's kind of lined up. And so that could be later this year, or it could even be early next, you know what I mean? Just depending on the timing. So I don't want them to think we're not receiving their referrals, but like, we don't need to just work at it without the other resources on board.
But I think that's good. They can pace the timing and then we'll help. Right? Yeah, that's good. Okay, on process, there's a small list here on packet page 9, original packet page 9. I think pretty straightforward, but let's just go through each of them. I don't have to do them all, but do you want to take the first one, Rachel, on minutes, or you want us to do it, or?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about it. You know, and I think part of it is just figuring out what works best for everybody. And so, you know, I think what we might do is well, I should say, first of all, you know, our secretary services have just been a little behind sometimes. And so they're able to get the summary minutes sometimes sooner than the verbatim minutes. And so one question is just whether or not we want to keep them all together or just have them reviewed as they come. So for example, not bringing the minutes from tonight before you until we have both the summary and the verbatim, or we could decouple them. And so you might get the summary minutes 1 week and then later on get the verbatim minutes. So I don't know if folks have a preference regarding that, but regardless of how the timing goes, what would happen is that Ms. Klicheva would then email them out, BCC to the PTC members to review. You'll send her any revisions. She would make those revisions in red line so that you can see what's changed, so that if a commissioner didn't make any changes, they could see though what their fellow commissioner is proposing. And those would be what come before you, would be those red line revised minutes in the packet for adoption, you know, then by adoption, incorporating those red line changes into the minutes. So that's what we would propose as the process. And so just one, does that sound okay? Or what might you adjust? Then two, do you want to like keep the verbatim and summary together, or is it okay if they're kind of decoupled?
We would not have to approve minutes twice though, in either case, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't have to do it twice. It would just, yeah, it would be each one by itself if you decoupled them.
Okay, Bart?
So I think I'm the chief reviser. I think I'm the chief reviser of minutes. In fact, I think
The runaway winner, I think. The runaway winner, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
I think Bryna has joined you in making some comments.
I was just getting to that. I've been joined now, and actually we did have a set of minutes that Ms. Klicheva released that had both of our comments on it, and I thought that was interesting and useful. And so I like the format of that to show, you know, on the same document, the multiple changes. So I thought it worked. I don't have any issue with breaking them apart. If the summary is done earlier, let's move forward with that. You know, sooner for any of this is better. And particularly some of these things that come to us are going to council. And I would rather them have the summary minutes without the verbatim than have nothing. So I think if they get decoupled, that's fine. We'll vote on each one as it comes through, and you know, those of us who want to will look at them. I do because I think it's part of this. I do just want to say, you know, there was a discussion at the council level about, in fact, one of their recommendations in our handbook is maybe we don't need the verbatim minutes, and I will say that when we discussed that last year in relation to the handbook, I was strongly supportive of keeping them. I really find those verbatim minutes helpful to us when we have these items that come to us repeatedly, you know, Castellea, right? 4 or 5 hearings, NVCAP, you know, there've been a bunch of them. And when I can go back and you know, while the summary is intended to capture the gist, sometimes it's the minutia that I don't have adequate notes myself, and that really helps. So I want to keep the verbatim minutes.
But my question is, I thought I heard you say that you want to approve both of them as they come.
Right. So if, for example, for tonight, let's say the summary minutes are available for our, we can review them in time for our March 30th, but not the verbatim. I want to go ahead and approve the summary version on March 30th. And if the verbatim comes, whatever the next one is, April 9th, then approve it then. We'd have to have, we need a separate vote for each set. Because
For summary minutes, why do you want them to be approved? Because they might get to council? I mean, if summary minutes are supposed to be informative for us, then why would we have to approve those if we're going to get verbatim?
well, so the summary minutes, my review of them is they need correction too. And so I want those revised versions to be the ones that go to council because I don't have any illusion that our city council members who do a phenomenal amount of work already are reading our 200+ page verbatim transcripts. So I think that they are more likely to read the summaries. And so I want to get those to them as soon as we can, get them approved in a corrected form.
Keith?
I agree. The verbatim minutes are very valuable. There's been times in meetings where I know that someone said something and I want to search for that because there's some piece of information that staff gave us verbally that we never got printed or that another commissioner said something. And the verbatim minutes have saved me so many times and the public too. People have told me in public that they use it. So I would think we should have both. I think we should have corrections for both and publish both on the website. And I think they both have their strong points.
And I'm also fine with the decoupling because I do find it, so usually the summary minutes come first because, and I find it helpful. The sooner we can review something, the better because it's closer to when we had the meeting and then our recollection's more accurate. So I'm fine decoupling it. Yeah.
Doria?
Thanks. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with my colleagues. The verbatim minutes are invaluable. And the council not having verbatim minutes is frustrating sometimes to me personally, because the only other way to understand what they say is to try to do a transcription yourself, which means stopping and going back and starting. And it's particularly difficult with really complicated long motions to understand. And the council does that more than we do. So I thank you very much for the fact that we still have verbatim minutes. I think they're great. And I'm fine with voting on them as they come to us.
Chair, could I just add?
Can I speak?
Oh,
I've been
sorry.
reading every. Sorry about that. I don't know why it's not working. Anyway, thank you. Sorry to interrupt. But I wanted to say, I think that the problem here is not us. The problem is not what we want and what we want to provide to council. I assure you, council members do read those verbatim minutes. That's what they've told me. And several different ones over the years. So they like it. It's a good discussion, especially on the difficult topics. I think the problem is that the service provider that the city is engaging with is not effective and not meeting the needs. So I would suggest maybe staff could talk to them and say, if you want to continue being our client, staff up and let's get these turned around faster. Just a suggestion. Thanks.
Keith, are you back on? Carrie, just hit your button again. No, I don't think that's her. Go ahead, try it again.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My bad. I thought that was the one on the end. We will definitely have a better template next week. Guaranteed.
Yeah. And I don't have any qualms with what Carrie just said. Sooner would be good. But on the other hand, I think that those transcribers are the ones who are doing our summaries. Is that right, Ms. Tanner? So I did want to say, yeah. So I did want to say, because we've only recently started reviewing those. I did want to compliment our transcribers on those summaries. I think it's difficult to condense what we say. A lot of times I think it's difficult to condense what I say because I sometimes say it too expansively, but I think they do a really good job from what I've seen. And so I'd like them to know that. And so maybe they can hustle up the verbatims and keep our business, because I do think that it's very useful and they're really doing it well.
Well, and just to add, like, software is there now where the raw verbatim minutes that have a lot of errors are available immediately. So it's just a matter of going through and editing them and making sure they're correct. But I think the summary, I'm surprised they provide those before the verbatim minutes, because you're right, that would make more sense to go the other way around.
Any more? Okay. The second one there is ensuring hyperlinks function properly, which I'm not sure if we need to improve on that sentence. I guess I would only add maybe that no matter where they appear, because sometimes we've been referred to an ARB report, so we have to go find that, and then we click on that, and that doesn't go anywhere, literally. So that gets very frustrating when we're in the midst of a very thick packet. So no other comments on that?
I would add, just to be consistent about where we can expect to find them. Sometimes it's in the middle of the text and sometimes it's in the margin. You know, if it's going to be intermittently in the midst of the text, at least the margin should always be double checked before sending a packet out.
Is that referring to the agenda or to the?
I was referring to the agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
You're reminding me, I think my first PTC meeting, I got the agenda and I couldn't figure out how to access the staff reports, because you just click on the agenda item, right? It's not highlighted, it's not underlined and in blue. And I think I had to call Ms. Tanner to say, how do I get the staff report? She said, clicked on the agenda item and that was it. So for the uninitiated, I think it can be confusing.
Who would like to comment on item C?
Okay, I'll comment on C. So this one's about what are we going to print out versus what's going to be a link? And I guess I actually wrote an email to Medina about it because I was so frustrated when I was looking at this table and my screen, my 13-inch screen was not big enough to make the text big enough to be able to understand like this giant table. And by the time I scrolled all the way to the right, I'm like, wait, where's the line here? So I would say that anytime there is something, and that one in particular was for Castellea, and it was the events. And we knew that the number of events was up for discussion. So therefore we needed to actually see that document because we were still slated to discuss it. So in that situation where it is just laid out as a topic for discussion, and it is a big charts, like I literally cannot see them unless they're printed out. So that is one. And then in general, I would say that if it is an item that is slated for discussion, so for example, a TDM, it shouldn't be linked. Like we should actually get that in our packet, because that is a signal that like you need to read this in order to be informed on that topic. If it's, prior minutes to a meeting and, it's just background material, I think it's okay to not print that out, for example. So that's kind of my guideline. If it is an item that is slated to be discussed, then we all should be informed to read it. And to me, when it's a link, it's kind of optional. That's the message that I'm getting, at least, especially when it's a big packet, right? Because I got to prioritize somehow. And if there's all these that are just background, I don't have time, honestly, for a big packet to read them all. So then I skip over something and realize, oh, that's where it was. So that's my 2 cents.
Carrie?
Thank you. Yeah, this is an interesting topic of discussion, so I'm glad you included it. I'm remembering back, I don't think they're here anymore. We used to have these 6 or 8 inch screens here that the presentations would be shown on.
Nice.
It also wasn't adequate at the time. And I think that presentations were printed out when we were meeting here in person for that reason, so that they would be visible. And I found myself tonight wishing I had printed out the revised agenda. We used to get the revised agenda at places. So, there are situations where we do want to print things out. There are situations where we don't want to print things out. So I don't know, if there's any doubt, I think maybe we could ask the commissioners to email. So we get maybe by Monday, and then they could be at our places by Wednesday if we need them to refer to in the meeting. Because otherwise, like you get the packet on Thursday or Friday, then that gives you some time and you could say, oh, I need to see this in a larger format, maybe. That's just a suggestion.
I just want to second that. If there may be just occasional times where a commissioner just wants something printed, and since we're back in chambers, we can certainly do that, for Wednesday, even if it's not like a typical thing that like you may not always want it printed, but just for whatever reason, that item you need to have it handy, we can do that.
Any others?
Would you want to ask Ms. Kluteva to solicit that input from commissioners on Mondays before a meeting so that we don't miss the opportunity to ask?
Yes, it would be helpful.
Okay.
That would be great.
Is that good? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. The next one up is about public comments broken into two pieces here. Who wants to tackle this one? Doria?
So this first part was kind of a question I had, and not wanting to make a more difficult process for staff. And I don't know how my colleagues feel about this, but sometimes as the comments come in, they're kind of held until a little bit before the meeting, or maybe when the packet's released. And this is a separate issue from the public sending in comments the last minute. But I personally would prefer to see them as they come in, so they're not just all, because sometimes we get comments about something that happened at the night before the meeting, and we don't see that comment for 2 weeks or more. And so it's kind of out of context, and the relation to what happened the night before is kind of lost, and sometimes, so I think it would be helpful if it's not more work. I mean, I don't know. I envision a system where there's a button, and every time something comes into our mailbox, it can just be forwarded out to us. And that would be easier because there's less decision-making and file managing maybe. But that is in the form of a question for staff.
Giselle?
Thank you. Yeah, I had the same question. I think if it's less cumbersome, I would prefer to receive them as they come in, maybe at the end of the day, or, whatever comes in. Also, I wanted to ask a related question. Is there a cutoff by when public comments can come in, or could we not put in a cutoff? Because there's been a few times where we get public comments and they're hefty, and it's like an hour before the meeting. So is there anything we can do about that? And then you're scrambling to get ready to come, and then you have comments to read, or can we not?
Well, I think it's so just maybe to go to the first comment. I think we could definitely facilitate either daily or every other day forwarding emails if that's the desire of the majority of the commission. I know some folks may appreciate the batching, so it just really depends. If there's a diverse opinion, we could batch them weekly or twice a week or something, maybe if that's a compromise for commissioners, just different preferences. And then of course we batch them all on on Wednesdays to print them with the packet. So if someone hasn't submitted a written public comment by Wednesday, it's not going to get, published online because it's just missing the printing deadline. I don't think there's a way to close the email inbox. So unfortunately, people can send things in at the last minute. I think we could have a proviso, perhaps that, if the comments aren't submitted by a certain time, it's going to be difficult for the commissioners to read and incorporate those comments, into the deliberation. I don't know how strongly people will take that, but I think that might be the most we could do. I know particularly with the Channing Street project, there was like constantly last minute, many page emails, letters that would come in, and it was hard to even keep track sometimes that they came. I don't know if we could stop that. We could try to discourage it, but people will
Council
do what
Yang
they're
is-
going to do.
Council Yang appeared on screen.
Yeah, so, I guess along those lines, we can't stop them from coming in, but we could set a rule, perhaps in the PTC's procedural rules or something like that, saying, things that are received after a certain time, will not be considered, right? I think that's
It's almost the default right now. I'm not sure why doing a rule for us is going to change it. It's just to notify the public that if it's not in by, midnight the night before, we're probably just not going to see it.
Well, I guess I think it's helpful if we want to bring some order to create a rule like that, because then it's clear, that commissioners shouldn't be considering it, right? It's more difficult when some commissioners have had the time and do look, and others don't, right? That's where you have a situation where we're operating with different information, and it's unclear then to an applicant or an appellant or a member of the public, is this something that I need to respond to? Because is the commission going to be weighing this late submission, or if we just have a clear cutoff, then everyone knows, this is a fair game part of the record, or it's not.
Carrie?
Thank you. I agree with what Doria brought up about having the emails come in as they come in. And we've been on other working groups that do this. I can't remember if that's what we did with the MVCAP, but I do believe with the XCAP that we had an alias that people would write to, and then that would distribute out to all the people. Is that right, Keith? Yeah. So I don't know what the technological rationale is, or if it's just personal preference. But if it's personal preference, I'd like to read them as they come in, and I'd like to be able to not have them all batched up. I find that that's really distracting for me. I like to be able to read an email as an email and not as a document, if that makes sense. So if that's a change we could make to the process that wouldn't be too burdensome for staff, it might even save you time. I don't know. But that's my 2 cents worth on that. And then the second thing was about the timing. It used to be way back in the day that emails that came in after the printing deadline were at places. I don't know that we need to do that. If they're coming in as they come in, we don't have to print them out. We can save some trees, but setting an understanding that when we're in the commission, we're not reading our emails like that. I think people might know that without us making a rule about it. So that's my comments on that.
Yeah, we could see what what the majority thinks on this as soon as we're done with conversation. Bart is up next.
So let me take these one at a time. In terms of receiving the emails, I honestly would not be excited to receive emails as they come into the city, one at a time. Castellea, for example, some of our hearings, we had 50 communications come in, and to my thinking, for me to get 50 separate emails that I have to, and it's, open that's actually more time consuming and more distracting than me finding time to sit down. I kind of like the blocks. I do think maybe there's a balance to be struck on how often we get those, right? Rather than just, it seems like we usually get them, we get a clump with the agenda, usually. When they send us the agenda staff report, we get a clump of public comments. And we usually get some the day of, and sometimes we get one in the middle. And so maybe we can tweak that. But I like them collected because then I can really just focus on them. Also, there's, I have noticed, and I'm sure my fellow commissioners have too, there are emails about, for example, police activity that we get copied on, right? Those are sent to the council and the PTC, even though there's no action by the PTC. We can't do anything about them. But, and I like those collected, and they frequently are. And to think that I'm going to get, 6 of those emails a day, and of course it's not flagged in the inbox what they are, so I've got to open it and read through it. It just would be more time consuming for me. So I view that as less efficient, but maybe there is some kind of balance. On the timing of comments, there is actually some case law on this, and I'm not going to advise the commission, but because part of the work I do involves delivering communications to city councils and planning commissions, all over the South Bay, and so I've become familiar with these rules, and I know how irritating it is to council, and it's bad practice, frankly, to deliver these kinds of things at the last minute. But there's actually some case law where judges or court opinions have talked about it, and there are some limitations. One thing we have to recognize is that someone, now that we're meeting in person, someone can walk up to our dais the night of the hearing and say, I have this 5-page letter that I'd like you to consider. And they distribute copies of it. And that is lawfully in the record. Now, there's some case law talking about sort of the weight and the recognition that when you're taking that tact, and sometimes it is tactical, there may be some limitations in the deciding bodies need to react to that. Sometimes it's done, the tactic is to try to get a continuance, right? I'm going to give you this information too late for you to possibly consider it. So what I suggest on this is maybe to have Mr. Yang kind of explore what we can legitimately do that might help us solve this problem. And maybe there is, we can't tell people they can't submit things, but maybe parodying this state law, which I'm not going to try to quote these cases, we could use that language that says basically that I think says something along the lines as it may not get the attention it deserves if you're delivering it at the 11th hour. And so maybe there's something like that we could include in our agendas that, again, uses language from a reported case that give us some protection and maybe set expectations among the public.
How's that sound, Albert?
Yeah, I can look into that. The one thing I was just trying to look up earlier was I know that the council rules have some provisions that speak to this, and I was just able to find those. So the council's rules are if you are submitting information related to a planning application closer than 5 days than the release of the packet. If you're doing that as an applicant, then the rule is that your item is going to get pushed to a later date. So we can, certainly have something like that for dealing with late applicant submittals. Late public comment, I think we'll probably have to go something along the lines of what Commissioner Heckman stated.
Keith?
Yeah, Carrie was correct. As for XCAP, every email that went to the email address was immediately forwarded. So there's no staff time. So in a lot of ways, that's the best solution. But there are 2 problems with that. One is some days we would get 50 emails and our email accounts would just be swamped. And you have other things to do in your life than being a commissioner. So that's problematic. The other is that people have jobs and other things. they may not be able to read it. Now we have commissioners having different amounts of information. So I would say have a standing rule and publicize it on the website. Say every night at midnight or every day at noon or every day at 4 p.m. You pick the time. We're going to take everything that was in the last 24 hours and mail it out to all the commissioners and have that publicized so people know that if the deadline is noon, they have to get it in by 11:59 or they're not going to get into the commissioners till the next day. I think that'd be the best route.
Doria?
Oh, I don't need to speak. I was going to point out that council, what Mr. Yang told us, that council has policy on late submissions.
And Brian?
I would just say that if, having more frequent batching would be helpful and at a set time approximately, because I know to look for the packet. But the problem is that when comments come in on the day, the day of the meeting, I think I'm done with the packet. I'm like, all right, done. Now I can do other things today. And I'm not checking my email necessarily or that account, right? So if I know though that at noon or whatever time it is that I should go check, then it'll also help. So that's what I would say.
Giselle?
Thank you. 2 quick comments. We could, one thing I was thinking, we could have encouraging language, such as we encourage you to submit your comments in by X time, so we don't run afoul of any sort of laws or regulations and everyone can participate. And the second thing I wanted to just expand on my prior comment is it's not the public comments that come in late, but I remember one instance we had attorneys, like I think they were applicant or somebody, attorneys that were submitting like 20-page letters with backup documentation and nuanced legal argument like an hour before. And like, that's what's very hard to digest, like on the fly as you're trying to get ready to go into a meeting. So maybe that 5-day rule could be helpful. I mean, the late public comments, those aren't a big deal if it's like a page or 2 or whatever. Thanks.
Yeah, I like the batching more like Bart does, because when I sit down and burn through them and the ones that are not even pertinent to us, I just zip right through them. But I hear a variety there. So maybe the compromise position is, more frequent batching. So it's not single, but it's not everything at once. I think that would be a way of doing it. But I think we have to have a deadline that the public over time gets used to, that, if it's not I don't know what it is yet, but if it's, our hearings on a Wednesday that, Tuesday night at midnight is the last thing that we're going to read, because that gives us a little bit of wriggle room if we're working or chasing babies or whatever we have to do in the next day. And it particularly addresses Giselle's, I think, important point that some legal document comes in from some attorney and we're supposed to be up to speed on it the next day. And some people had a chance to read it and some didn't, like Keith says. So that doesn't make sense for anybody. So I buy that. Carrie?
Yeah, I just don't know if that is, it would be more convenient for us. I'm not sure if it's right for the reasons that Bart mentioned, that they have a right to speak about their topic. And if we were here live, they could hand it to us. It might be annoying, it might be bad form, but it's still a right. So I'm not sure if we can limit it.
I don't disagree with that at all. I'm just making the comment that the public shouldn't expect that all 7 of us have read it. That's kind of the point I'm making. And however that has to be worded relative to how we can deliberate on that, including the document from the attorney or not, that's what has to be sorted.
Well, I think especially if they hand it to us, they can expect that we're going to read it there, but we won't have time to process it. But certainly for electronic documents, we're not reading our emails when we're up here. Like, there has to be some kind of cutoff where we set the expectation.
I think I'm agreeing with you, which is that if somebody came up and said, instead of sending this to you an hour ago, I'm handing it to you at the dais, so you have to take it into consideration. Unless we stop and read that 20-page document, we probably won't be taken into consideration, right?
I think we have to receive it though.
No, how can we read 20 pages sitting up here? I mean,
I would love to hear from legal experts about
that's, I was
that.
just gonna say, that's where we
I
need
think-
Albert to
I
step
think
in.
that what Albert was saying is that you can receive it and, well, I mean, I should say, I guess Albert is a question of whether we have to receive it. I think sometimes commissions don't have to receive documents at the last minute, but maybe there's different cities have, I think, interpreted laws differently. But I think to your point, if it's a long document, the expectation that someone is reading it and taking it into consideration is different than it being part of the record, that such and such person on this date submitted this. It's part of the record. It may not be part of your deliberation because you may not be able to read it at that time. But if, you know, someone goes back and looks at the record for that project, they would find that public comment as having been submitted for that project. Is that right, Albert? I
Yeah.
think that's what you're trying to say.
So is there something that needs to be done on that? Either more research or written up somehow?
Yeah, we can come back with maybe some language to add on to the agenda or something like that too.
Because it's awkward for us if, you know, Bart has a light day and he wants to read it and, you know, I'm jammed until 5 minutes to 6 on a legal document. And I don't see that as any different than if they walked up here and said, here's the document, and we don't stop the hearing for an hour to all read the document. So that's what we need to sort it out, right? Carrie, is that your point? Okay. So do we want to like do a straw vote on whether it's batching or individual? Or, and if it's batching, it could be more frequent batching, not everything all at once.
Are you thinking like once a week or something?
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Are you thinking once a week?
Well, we haven't heard from our batcher over here. If she would like to chime in on this, the workload part of it.
Yeah, sure. Right now, what I'm doing is I usually, when I send you a packet, right, online, I send you all public comments batched, and it is usually Wednesday or Thursday. And I also send you PDF on Tuesday, the day before the meeting. I don't have a set time. It can be afternoon or evening, where I compile all the documents that I received after I publish, all the emails that I received after I published the packet, and then I send it to you. And I have to batch everything anyway because I have to publish those emails online on the website, so that public can see that we have received them. And yeah, but anything you prefer, that's not a problem for me. Whatever is convenient for you. Yeah.
Bart?
Yeah, let me throw out a concept. What if we had a batch 1 week after a hearing? Because Commissioner Suma had mentioned, and I've had this same experience. I get that with the next agenda, I get a comment about the last meeting, and I really have to struggle to remember to refocus on that. So maybe we could have and there aren't always comments that come in that. So if we had like one batch, if there's anything there, a week after a hearing, and then as you are currently doing, the batch that comes with the agenda, which, like you said, is usually Wednesday or Thursday, and then maybe we go, you know, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, and I guess Wednesday. Well, Wednesday, you know, I don't know when the best time on Wednesday to send things that have come in since Tuesday night that we're likely to see them. Like if I said noon, right? Well, then what if something comes in at 2? So it's not your fault, right? Because it's just so I'd be interested in a solution for Wednesday, but that's kind of it's kind of a daily once you've sent us the agenda with the first clump, which would then be like for the last week or so since the 1 week after the last hearing. So I guess
we tried. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to first say, is that manageable, or because I don't know really what's involved, or is that too much? Or is it workable? Medina?
To send you a batch of emails on Wednesday, a week after the meeting.
But
Okay.
that would be the first one to see if anything's coming in that week, and then let's like start with a meeting we've had. So the first batch would come in a week after. What I'm going to call the second batch would come to us with the next agenda, which you are already doing.
Mhm.
And then what I'm going to call a third batch would
Yep.
come by the end of the day, Friday. So anything that's come in to you since you sent us the agenda and the second batch, those would be collected, and then we get all those before the weekend, right? So it gives us a good opportunity. And then I was suggesting, these are like dailies as we approach. So Monday at the end of the day, Tuesday at the end of the day, and then I needed some help on a Wednesday solution.
Yeah,
but-
only thing I'm going to say is, I mean, I think the main thing, I think we should try something and then probably have a conversation about how it works, because it's going to be different than what we've been doing. Because our meetings are regularly held, but somewhat irregular. It's the second and last Wednesday. So sometimes it's like 3 weeks, like when you have a long month, like March, in fact, we have kind of a longer stretch between meetings than other months. And so we could try, packet days obviously has emails that have come in. It could be that Friday, and then it could just be twice a week, like Wednesday and Friday. And that way, no matter what week it is, you're always getting them. And then maybe the only caveat would be the week of the commission. Do you want to receive that batch on like Wednesday morning? Or do you want to just receive the app places that day for everything that's come in from like Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of that week? Or we could do like Tuesday and Friday, for example, knowing that there's going to be the printed ones would be all those that have come in between the last hearing and the packet printing.
Doria?
I like Bart's solution to add, if it's easy enough, to add a post-meeting batch. Because considering that we don't often get as much email and from the public as we do on a project like Castellea. So that's not usually the way we get email. And I was wondering, Keith, did you say something about having a place to post on the website comments, or did I mishear you?
My point was, I thought we should have a rule that's clear and post that on the website.
Oh, I see.
So that the public knows. And so, for example, if we have a cutoff at, let's say, noon every day, then if they submit something afternoon, they should expect us to have it.
Okay. So I think that would, if that works and it's easy for everybody, I think it sort of solves the problem that I mentioned. And I only know this because members of the public have come to me and said, hey, this wasn't published for 3 weeks or something. The other thing would be to do, and this used to be the case with the council, it's not done anymore. Every single, and maybe it's more important, obviously, for it to happen with the council, but things were just posted, emails were just automatically posted online. Every day they were added to, even from staff members sometimes, as long as it wasn't proprietary. And that has gone by the wayside, but maybe that would be overkill maybe that was considered overkill even for the council and would be considered overkill for the PTC. But I like Bart's solution.
Rhina?
I just thought about, I like Bart's solution. I think it's a good one. I like the sweep after the meeting, but if we were to decide to send every email along, I think we could just filter, right? You just set up filters. So I'm kind of now a little agnostic. The big thing that I feel the most strongly about is that kind of encouraging the public, or kind of letting the public know that if you get it to us after this time, we might not be so fully prepped on it. So then, because then I can kind of stop checking every single minute. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. The filter situation is the only way to fly with the emails if they are forwarded, and I'm sure we could do a training on that to make sure it wouldn't be a burden if we decide to go that way. If we're going to batch it up, having it a week before and a week after and the week of, it is every week. That is definitely a weekly situation, except in cases like March when you have a long month. I think we get 2 of those a year. So I think that Ms. Tanner suggested having a predictable cycle. So if we did do it, for example, every Tuesday or, you know, Fridays, also Fridays the week before, or when we're sending out the packet, that would be the least amount of burden on staff. I just want to make sure that we're being respectful of their time.
Yeah, I don't feel it's necessary to have anything presented at place if we have a noon cutoff. I don't think we have to be getting physical documents because we've already said we're probably not going to get to them. And if we do, it's not going to be even across the commission. And if they're out in email, then we'll read them the next day, you know, when we get out of the meeting at night. So I don't think, plus I think that's the wrong way to train letter writers. No problem, because if you don't get them in on time, you'll get them stuck in front of the commissioners when they show up at the meeting. So they're still going to get delivered that day, which that's not our goal. Our goal is to make sure we get it by a certain date, so we can, a certain time on that date, so we can process them, or else they're kind of ruled out of order. Not legally speaking, but. So is there enough consensus? We should just try that system for a while and see how it works. Just get feedback from Nina and all that.
Did we decide if Tuesdays or Fridays?
I think it's one of these things you can try something.
Why don't we try Tuesdays, since that would always at least be the day before the commission? And then we can see how that goes. And if folks feel like they want to go to the direct forwarding, then we can look at that. Or adding, you know, more batching if that's helpful.
Okay.
I will add that the direct forwarding had the added benefit of people being heard on the day of without the need to come here to be heard. So we had a plethora of participation, but we didn't always have to have people lining up for public comment. So it helped the meetings be more efficient.
I mean, the one thing about getting 50 messages is that it clogs up your inbox. It's an inconvenience, but it does tell you that people are really interested in this. And that's nice to know. And sometimes if it's all lumped in one email, you don't quite understand it always. So there's pros and cons.
Okay.
At the risk of complicating things, I mean, we could try both, especially if we can set up an automatic forwarding and we're not spending staff time doing both. So really Medina's, because we have the general inbox that all of it goes into anyways, it's not just coming to like me individually. So if we can get that to set up to auto forward, then that's just kind of doing that. The computer's doing that for us. And then Medina's batching them, which we're already batching them anyways, but we're just changed the batching date to Tuesdays. And then those who want to see it in the batch could have it. And then those who get the auto forward can have it.
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest that, like we split. Can we elect to do the auto forward, meaning so that Bart can opt out of that and Carrie and I can opt in because we feel confident that we can get our email boxes to filter for us. Okay, then I think let's do both, right? And then Carrie and I can, or whoever wants to get the emails as they come can report back to the rest of us how it's going.
And I'm happy to offer some tech support to my fellow commissioners if needed.
So we'll take a look at the auto forwarding settings, and then we'll make sure we also, if you have a different email that you want us to use than the one we typically use for you, let us know. And if you want to opt out, just let us know. But we'll let everyone know before we institute it, so you won't just start suddenly getting them. We'll let you know it's going live.
Oh, surprise us.
No.
Okay. There were a couple other ones that came up that I thought of that I wanted to add, and then there's others that anybody can add. One is that I hope new commissioners, our newest commissioners, got the bylaws and the procedurals and so on. So just, make sure you're up to speed on all those, or if you're not, address something to Albert, or I know that stuff pretty well, so you could ask me about it as well. But at one meeting recently, it came up that, we should do a substitute motion. We can't do substitute motions, as Albert pointed out in that meeting. So just make sure we know what we can do and can't do. If there's any questions, let's just, dig into it offline. You notice the seating tonight. I don't know if the newest people know that the tradition for years, forever, as far as I know, has been that the newest commissioners sit the closest to the center. Not so you can be looked at a lot and make sure you did your homework and all that, but just to kind of integrate you with the group. And the older veterans, like Carrie and Giselle, would be on the flanks. So that's how this came about. It's just a traditional template. And the last thing is just, there's been a little bit of discussion, and I've had a little bit offline with the last year's chair about liaison to council and how that works. And I talked with the mayor just to confirm, what the expectations are. And I think it's basically the same as we've always done, which is that first of all, on our side, the liaison to us notifies us of items that are, pretty pertinent. Like on the 21st, the housing element is coming up and you're on, Bart. So she's going to say, Bart, make sure you don't forget. And so that's the first thing. Although I think commission members are going to stay up to speed on some of these key items anyway with council. And then when in this case, Rachel gets to the meeting on that item, she will announce the liaison that is present and say, the liaison is here to answer any questions or so on, so that the mayor knows about that. And then, like any other staff resource, that's sort of all that's officially going to be done. And, one option was to have the liaison make some sort of statement on behalf of the planning commissioners on a particular item. And that the decision on that is that should be done at the request of a council member or the mayor, as opposed to routinely having something come out ahead. So that's where that one is.
Chair, how early in advance of the council meeting will staff let the commissioners know? Because we had some problems with that in the past.
I think I understood you through that N65 or whatever that is, but it's how early will the staff member let the council members know?
No. So let's say Bart is going to have to show up next week.
Right.
Does our staff member call him an hour before or when?
If I understand the question, the procedure has been, and I think still is that as long as the staff liaison remembers to announce that the person is there, then that is the time that the mayor or another council member could ask for an overview on the item, or else that person just sits there as a resource until the item's over.
That's not what she's
I think that Commissioner is asking about when they'll get notice if there's actually an item coming to the council.
Okay.
And I think
I just couldn't hear with the mask.
yeah, what we could do is look at ensuring, and I think what we can at least do is when the agenda is published, which is 11 days ahead of the council meeting, we can make sure that commissioners know, especially the liaison and the substitute backup liaison, I think there's a different word for it, know that, okay, actually on the 14th or whatever date, there is an item, here's the agenda. So that can be up to 11 days ahead of time. And then that way, if the primary person is not available, the secondary person would know, hopefully that soon. We could do it earlier, but then it just becomes, sometimes items move at the last minute. And so it could just cause more confusion.
11 days sounds great. I would say a week sounds great. Just let's try to reduce as much as possible any last minute scurrying on some of these items.
Yeah, we can do that.
Bart?
Yeah, no issue with that. A week sounds great. But on the other item that Ed mentioned, what's going to happen at the council meeting? I'm frankly a little disappointed to hear that. And Carrie, I hope you're right that the council members read the verbatim minutes so that they read what I'm about to say, because my impression, coming from a background where I go to a lot of planning commission meetings and I follow up with a lot of council meetings, and I can see the relationship between the planning commission and the council. And I can hear in the council's deliberation reflections to a greater or lesser extent of the planning commission's deliberations. And one of the frustrations I've had since I've been on the planning commission is when I have observed a council meeting on an item that has come from the planning commission, I usually have the impressions they have not read the minutes, and that they are not, or at least they are not in any way attempting to reflect our recommendation before they go in a different direction. And it's not for lack of a staff report, which lays out our recommendation. And so my idea, which I had talked to the vice mayor about, was let's formalize a process rather than wait for a council member to maybe ask about a recommendation we made. Because frankly, when I've been the liaison, usually the only question I get is a very pointed question about, one nuance of a very, the 3-hour discussion we had that covered a bunch of topics. And so my thought was, if we formalize this process and right after the staff report, as an augmentation of the staff report, the planning commissioner, who is a liaison, would give a balanced explanation of the recommendation and why. And we've all done this at one time or another. I'm not sure Keith has done it yet, but you will. It's what we do when they call on us, but to make sure they call on us so we get out there as a part of their dialogue, the basis for our recommendation before they start talking about whether they want to follow our recommendation or not. Because too often they don't talk about it in terms of, do we want to follow the planning commission's recommendation or not? They just talk about, what do we want to do? And so anyway, so that was the thrust of what I was trying to accomplish. And it doesn't seem like I was successful, but I'm hoping that the council, having read these verbatim minutes, will think some more about this and maybe bring us more strongly into their process.
Doria?
Thank you. And a couple of things. One is I want to thank Rachel, because I think Rachel reminds us as a courtesy, and that didn't always used to happen, period. It was kind of our responsibility. So I think it's very kind of her to do that. And Bart, we used to do that. Never since I've been on PTC, but like 6 or 7 years ago, even the process was, there was time in the council agenda for the PTC liaison when appropriate, And I think it was the council that didn't feel that was necessary, because it was sort of redundant with the minutes and the video and also the staff report. So I think that they thought it was just taking up time. And the other problem is not that there's anybody here that would do this, but there were occasions when I'm sorry to say, commissioners sort of took it as an opportunity to express their own personal opinion. I was there recently and I was asked a question that was outside of our discussion. It was something that came up later. And I said, I can't tell you what the planning commission thought about that, because we didn't discuss that. That was new information. So I don't know if that helps you with a little bit of the history of it. So I kind of think it's maybe, if the council wants that, it's their choice on their agenda, I think. So I don't know if that history is interesting. Yeah.
Carrie?
I would add, I don't know that all of the council members are reading the verbatim minutes, so just wanted to clear that up. But I do think they are, and I do believe that the staff report reflects our discussions for the most part, and so they are getting the gist of it. as to how they want to process that information, we're a recommending body, not a deciding body. They're the deciding body. So we do what we can. We have a good discussion. We provide the verbatim minutes so that they can get the nuances of our discussions. And sometimes it doesn't go our way, and it's frustrating, and I share your frustration, but it happens.
Yeah, Bart?
Just to clarify, my issue is not when it doesn't go our way, because that's their prerogative. Like you said, we're a recommending body. My issue is when there's no outward appearance that they've even taken our work into consideration in going a different way. That's the concern I have is that there are just no signs that they really understood our recommendation that before they went in a completely different direction. And if they had, by way of example, if they said, we understand the planning commission did this and they were clearly, thinking along these lines, but I think differently. And so this is why I want to go this way. That's the dialogue I'm looking for from a council, from any council, not just ours, is if you're going to depart from what the planning commission recommended, because this is our job, is to tell them what we recommend, just like our planning staff has a job of making these recommendations. And if you're going to depart from that, it benefits the process to explain why.
I think that would be awesome, but that has not been my experience. I mean, I can think of a recent example where we sent a 7-0 recommendation and had an opportunity to explain it, and it didn't make a difference. I believe the deciding vote was left to chance. So yeah, I'm not sure that is that adding time to council meetings would solve the problem that you've identified.
Okay, did anybody think of any other process items that we didn't have in the original agenda that wanted to be put on the table? Yeah, Doria.
I don't think we always need this, but sometimes with complicated motions, if this is not a burden for staff in any way, it would be good for us to see the motion up on the screen like council does. Because sometimes I think we're kind of confused about what the motion is, or to have some process to record the motion really accurately and read it back. So it's not always that we need that. It's sometimes that we need that. I don't know how.
I agree with you, Doria, on that sometimes especially because of the alphabet, I'm often the first to vote. And it gets to me, I'm like, whoa, what are we voting on again? So I think that it might be nice to your point, that we don't often need it. It's not all the time. And so maybe if we have the flexibility to be able to request that, it be typed up and written out if we need it. Would that be sufficient?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that doable?
Rachel? Yeah, Rachel, are you still on? I don't see your picture anymore. There you
Yeah,
are.
that's still here. It is doable. I think one of the things I would just caution us to avoid is to get into what can sometimes be an intense focus on the wordsmithing of the motion and losing the substance of it because we're spending a lot of time haggling over the motion. I think also, unlike council, I would prefer for us to know when that's needed, and then to put it up when we're done. I don't think live typing will be something that we will be able to do. It'll just create, I think, more anxiety and challenge than it will helpfulness. So it might be a little bit different than the way council does it, where the clerk is typing it and you're kind of watching it. I find it distracting, actually, personally, to be watching someone typing while other people are talking still. And so maybe we could just find a happy medium.
I think that's fine. I agree with both my colleagues on that one. And I don't think it's going to be frequent, but for example, when we're doing the housing element on each of those points with a motion and then with side motions, with amendments, friendly and unfriendly, that got a little bit difficult. Of course, we're also doing it on screen, so on Zoom screen. So that'd be great if we can count on staff to do that a few times on the complicated ones. That'd be great. Any others that we should chat about? Not that this is the last time, but this is a good time, so. Okay. So we are, time check here, we're at 8:30. The substantial part of the agenda is done and sort of getting ready to put together the draft plan. And we can go a little bit or not at all into that relative to what we've said. And I'm looking at Rachel a lot here to consult in terms of, do we want to look at the plan that we have right now and say what we'd like to delete for this year? Is that a way we should go forward, or?
Let me pull it up. Well, maybe I'll just tell you what I'm thinking based on today, and then you could tell me if that seems aligned. I think what essentially the plan would have would be the items we discussed today. It would have the items that are already underway that are going to be coming to PTC from planning and from Office of Transportation. So that's kind of in that table there, plus the items that we discussed today. As far as items from last year, I guess I would say if they're carried over from previous years, they're in that table that we sent out today. So any carryover items should already be contained within what we already have coming up. So I don't know that we need to look at the last year's plan and like eliminate things because they're kind of already accounted for. And I think the other item, of course, would be just like noting that we have projects that will come up when they come up. We don't always know them from applicants, and we would process those, you know, as they are submitted.
A lot of things on packet page 20 seem like they're done, but you're going to know that. I don't think we have to go through it. Like, you know, accessory dwelling unit below market rates and stuff like that. We've already looked at it. So,
well, it's going to come back though for the ordinance though, because we need to actually adopt the ordinance, and we had some feedback from HCD on ordinance changes we need to make for ADUs. So you'll see that back, but with some added work.
Yeah, let me state that a different way. You know better than anybody sitting up here what is going to be ongoing from our this year and what we've accomplished. So
Yep.
I don't think we need to spend a lot of time direction on that.
Agreed.
So commissioners, what else would you like to accomplish tonight? Bart?
I had three minor suggestions on what I'll call the boilerplate part of the work plan. And these are all on packet page 10 of the original, 12 of the revised staff report. If I could just go through those. Rachel, do you have that page in front of you?
Could you tell us where you are to on that? You said the page, but when you said boilerplate, is there a certain section?
Well, yeah, I'm going to take you there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure.
I have it up.
Okay, I want to make sure first on the, so the first one I'm sure you'd catch, but it says the 2022 to 22 work plan overview. You see that?
Yep.
Okay, so I think that's going to be 23. Most of the things in that box about the commission, you're going to fix because that's just the format box. So I'm not going to talk about that. But in the last sentence, this is a sentence that I think stays when you make all those changes. And I just had one kind of grammatical cleanup. So the sentence is, for more information about Planning and Transportation Commission, PTC, please visit our webpage. And what I'd like to see here is, instead of a comma, go to, how about just a colon? And then the URL. Visit our webpage, colon. So get rid of the comma, go to.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's the first one. Or that's the second one, actually. And then the third one is in the mission statement. The first bullet reads, preparing and making recommendations to the city council on the city's comprehensive plan regarding development, public facilities, and transportation in Palo Alto. So when I read that sentence, what that makes me think about is general plan updates or comprehensive plan updates, right? Which we do on an irregular basis, or you know, every number of years, right? But we really do two things regarding the comp plan. One is, as there are revisions made to the comp plan, those come through us and we work with them and make recommendations. But we also apply the comp plan to proposals as they come through. And so what I wanted to suggest in that bullet is to just replace the word regarding after a city's comprehensive plan, replace the word regarding with and applying the comprehensive plan to proposed. And then we pick up the sentence with the word development. So get rid of regarding and add and applying the comprehensive plan to proposed. So if you take a look at that and see if you think that's a more accurate reflection of what we do. I was thinking it's a more full explanation in our mission statement. And those were my only changes to the boilerplate.
Thank you.
I was just going to ask a question of colleagues in that exact same spot. It's quite obvious that one of the important things we do is provide a hearing for public comment and public interaction. Is that something that would be worth calling out in the mission statement, or is that redundant because it's so obvious? It's just such an important part of what we do to let the public speak here and before it gets to council. It's not going to change the way we do business. Just talk about the mission statement.
I like it.
Sorry.
I like it.
Okay, Bryna.
I like it too, because to Bart's point earlier, sometimes things don't go our way, and it's good to highlight that the purpose of it isn't for things to always go our way, but to give the public a venue to interact.
Yeah, that's well put. We can still have a successful meeting because the public's been heard, even if council doesn't do what we've suggested that they do. Or even if the PTC doesn't do what most of the public suggested to be done, because it's at least out in the public domain. Keith's on board for you. So maybe we can figure out a way to put a sentence in about that. Rachel?
Yeah, we can do that.
So just to clarify on that point, I think it's, first of all, I think it's a good add that to reflect in our mission statement that we
Provide a forum.
solicit, right? We want public input. I think we have to choose the words a little carefully, because not everything that comes to us is actually technically a public hearing, even though we take public comment on those things. And so just some thought about the right wording for that concept, which I think is a really good addition.
Yeah, maybe like public forum for input from the citizens, or whatever.
Engaging public comment.
Okay, other things that we might want to accomplish tonight before Rachel starts work on this in the next 15 minutes. And Rachel's tired and sick. We need to let her go. Nothing else? Okay, then let's close that part of the agenda. Bart?
I just want to say it's good to be back in person.
Yeah.
With 6 of the 7 of us, and I'm really happy for our society that we are, moving through this, and everybody needs to keep staying safe. I think, you're seeing here, up on the dais, some people are wearing masks and some people are not, and that's the way it should be. Everybody should be comfortable doing what they think is right, but as we come back together, we all have to figure out our levels of comfort. So for me, this has been a really good experience tonight.
Long time coming. Okay, we want to take a look at the next agenda items because there are no minutes. I checked that yesterday. I don't think there are any committee meetings. So the next agenda item on March 30 is projected to be Castalia School, and then the second one's recommendation on ordinance for CUP. I think people know what the first one is. Could you clarify what the second one is for the rest of the commission?
Yes, so this in some ways relates to the retail item we talked about. Last year, council passed a temporary ordinance regarding CUP thresholds for certain types of uses to try to stimulate more filling of vacant storefronts, lowering some of the thresholds for sizes. And so we're going to be looking at whether or not we want to make that permanent and PTC would be asked to make a recommendation to council on that topic.
Do you have a feel of how involved that is in terms of amount of time?
I think the changes ended up being pretty, I don't want to say minute as in though they're inconsequential, but they weren't controversial. And so I think that it may not be an overly long item. I do imagine what we would do is to take that first and then Castellea possibly, because I do think it could be more brief.
Is
for
it
the
time?
It's
Sorry.
It's time sensitive because the ordinance expires. And so we need to get a recommendation to council before the ordinance expires.
Do we know when it expires?
I believe it's in June, so it needs to get to them before their summer recess starts.
Okay, but this is March. So looking at the Castellea item, I have a suggestion there. As I understand it, the original staff idea was to bring this back twice, the 30th and then the 13th, because that's what we've done before. But I think we have a pretty good shot at being able to get this done in one meeting, because we've been through this before numerous times. This is you're bringing back stuff to us that we've already talked about. So it seems to me like that wouldn't be moving mountains to happen, but it's also why I asked if the cup could be moved to the next meeting, the cup issue.
We could move it. I mean, I think just the risk is that we get to 11 or midnight with Castellea and then decide to continue it. And then we've got 3 items on that next meeting, 2 of which are time sensitive. So happy to adjust, but I don't know if the track record of Castellea hearings suggests that they get finished in one evening.
But it just seems to me like this is a little bit different than the last time because of how we've approached the issues, and you're coming back with new information. But there's
certainly I think the wild card is public comment. So if there's 2 or 3 hours of public testimony, that is going to happen regardless of whether you plan for it to be one night or not. And so if that puts you at 8 or 9 o'clock starting your deliberation.
Yeah, I guess what I'd say is that we could try to get it done in one meeting, but there's another related item, 2 or 3 related items, which is that Commissioner Chang is scheduled to be out. Commissioner Reckdahl last time recused on this item, so might be out again. I just had a scrambled bunch of family plans that happened that I should really be out that 14th as well. And I don't think if it came up with that we want to be voting on this issue with 4 commissioners here.
Well, I think what I could do is just talk to Miss French about just the schedule in general in that regard. And so maybe it is 2 hearings, but maybe the second one isn't the 13th, or we reshuffle it. Because I do agree having absences is not great for the commission, the city, the applicant. Like, it's just not good if we have a bunch of absences. So maybe it's more about thinking about the 13th and the relationship between the 30th and the 13th to see if we can move out Castellea. Castellea is a little bit more flexible in terms of the time sensitivity, but also we have to make sure the applicant's available, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe we can follow up on that kind of arrangement.
Did you say move it out of the 30th to the 14th, to the 13th?
Well, I'm saying we can either have, we could have the first hearing on the 30th and then have the second not on the 13th, or if we still want them to be sequential, then we would figure out different days for Castellea.
I was just thinking if you could move out the cup threshold and we jumped on it, we could get it done on the 30th. The other issue is that on the 30th, Commissioner Suma is going to be on the East Coast.
Oh, right.
So she would be starting this meeting at 9 p.m. So in either case, I would appeal to commissioners that maybe we could start early for that meeting, at 5 or 5:30, if people could, do that. If we can't, we can't. But otherwise, when it gets to 9 o'clock here, it'll already be midnight time in the East Coast on the 30th.
Do you mean in general or just for that meeting? plenty of times I would be happy to start earlier regardless of the subject matter. But I believe our rationale here was to be available after working hours for people.
I thought you were asking if she was moving to Florida, but no.
No, but I'm pretty sure they've got good coffee there, so she'll be okay.
What?
I couldn't-
They have good coffee there. You'll be okay.
We certainly can start the hearing at 5. Maybe commissioners can just let me know if that does not work for them to start us to start at 5 on the 30th. And again, I'll talk with Ms. French. I love the optimism of getting CAFs done in one evening. I do not feel that that will happen. And so it just gives me pause about moving other items around on that hope. I certainly can move, we can maybe rethink the 13th as the second hearing date, but I just don't see that happening.
So one of the advantages of moving it to 5 here is that if Commissioner Suma does go to sleep on the East Coast, we can keep going to our midnight and have another extra hour. So are there people who have pluses or minuses about starting early on the 30th?
If we start early, that's just, there's a challenge with people that are dealing with their kids. I already have to try and get them fed before I come here at 6. To come earlier would be a hardship. That doesn't mean I couldn't come late or I couldn't find other arrangements for that one-off time.
I totally understand.
Yeah, but that's the negative side.
Yeah, Bart?
And I think that applies to the public. Obviously, there's a lot of public interest in that item, and those people would need to get here by 5 instead of 6 too, to see all the proceedings.
That's right.
Those that want to come in person.
If it were the first item or the only item, that's correct. So that's also a good point. Yeah, Doria?
I appreciate your thoughtfulness. However, I think it's going to be the 1 and 2 and 3 a.m. times that really bother me, not 9 a.m. And I don't want to put a burden on all my colleagues
Okay.
and the public. So,
Well, ask Carrie where to get that good coffee then.
yeah.
Okay. So how do you want to manage this? You want to circle back
Well, as
on
far
a
as
second date?
as far as the 5 p.m., were folks mostly okay with 5 p.m. or I heard maybe it doesn't work for some folks?
No, I think we just defeated that idea.
Okay.
We're not going to do
So-
5.
So I will circle back with Amy just on like the scheduling. Again, my biggest concern, I mean, I guess the way we could do it is like have the first hearing on the 30th. If it is continued, then continue it instead of to April 13th to the following hearing in April. So that's probably the likely solution.
That would work too. I was trying to be doubly optimistic and say if we got it done on the 30th, then everybody around that issue would also be happy because then it's on to council from us. So
I had my hand up for
Go ahead.
another scheduling not related to the 30th. Just wondering, I don't see any dates off. We're starting to, spring break is only a few weeks away and that seems to be handled, but what about summer planning? Are we still planning to push through all of these meetings or do we know yet?
good point. I think we had picked one of these dates as time off, right?
Yeah, I thought we had this discussion, but I don't see it on the calendar. So I just want to be clear.
I thought the discussion was there was going to be a couple of days where folks were absent. And so we were going to see if there were more absences that accumulated around those dates and then decide if we wanted to have time off. That's my recollection of the discussion is that folks did not want to choose, the majority did not want to choose days off to cancel ahead of time.
But if we're rearranging schedules around absences and we want to maximize the number of people that are here on the commission, I think we should.
Oh,
try
I'm not
and-
saying we shouldn't.
Yeah.
I'm just saying what the discussion was that the
Oh, I'm
members,
not
the
addressing this to
majority.
you. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Ms.
yeah.
Tanner, just to the chair. Just like if we are going to try and maximize the number of commissioners that are here, we should have that discussion.
Right. And now we're at the end of March and before we were in December or something. So I think it's appropriate.
totally.
I thought
I
we
thought we had penciled something in.
yeah, that's just exactly the words I was gonna say. I thought it was like 7:27.
We did.
Was it 7:27? I think
So
that was your day off. So that's why you picked it, I think.
Right. But my memory is consistent with Rachel's and that I had said I'm going to be out 7:27 And I think we kind of tabled the discussion. There were, maybe we had one or two commissioners who weren't there that night when we were
Okay.
discussing it, and we needed to check in with them. And so maybe in the next, maybe people can let Ms. Tanner know what their summer plans are.
Do 6 of us know tonight? Do we want to try to do this tonight or?
I don't know for sure, but I can speculate that 629 is going to be one of the adjacent to the 4th of July week. Like we can just look and see if it's the end of the previous week or it's that same week. Because that's usually one that, so that's the previous week. So maybe it'll work out. I don't know.
So Chair, perhaps we could all come, well, I don't know if you want to add I don't know if it's a good idea to add this to our March 30th, but I mean, normally we're talking about this at the end of the meeting. And I was thinking if everybody came to that March 30th meeting with the dates that they were anticipating being away, and of course, Doria maybe could give us her dates before the end of the meeting, because that could be very late. Or just
Why don't we just,
communicate with Rachel by email. and
why don't
just-
we do that in advance and then she'll have the tally
Right,
for us?
and then maybe during her report at the beginning of the meeting, she can say, here's what it looks like.
Well, my intention in asking was to plan around it. I don't have the dates yet. I want to plan vacation dates around days that we're not meeting.
Right, but if we figure out first who's already planned a trip, like I have, right, then that will give us some guidance. Like if there are 2 people that have already planned a trip on the 27th, so that they're going to miss
There
the day
are,
I'm missing.
there are.
There are, so that might help those of you who haven't planned to plan.
Already sounds like 27.
Okay, so we will all email Rachel in advance of the next meeting and tell her, to the extent we have scheduled, we know we're going to miss a meeting this summer, tell her when that is. Yep, okay.
Good, thanks for bringing that up. Other items? If not, I hope Assistant Director Tanner goes straight to bed. Thanks really for kind of hanging on here
Yeah, no
in your
worries.
state. So appreciate it
No
very much.
worries. And I just want to one last thing, even though you're trying to dismiss me, what's coming up next week at council? We don't have any items that have come from the PTC on the 14th. We do on the 21st have the housing element site selection on March 21st. So that will be at the council on that date. We also will have on the council's consent calendar, the comp plan and housing element annual progress report. But if it remains on consent, won't be any discussion on that item.
I
Okay.
ask one last question.
Sure, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a quick question. I don't need a detailed answer. I know that HCD responded to our ADU laws and wanted some changes made. Were there any changes that they requested to protected trees? Do you know off the top of your head? No? Okay,
For ADU specifically,
yes.
no, there was nothing related to protected trees, either specifically or generally.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I found this quite enjoyable and quite productive, and great to be back and seeing you all on this side of the screen, except for Rachel. So thanks much, and we'll see you on the 30th. We're adjourned.